A bruised daughter shoved by her own father into the hands of Miami's most feared mafia boss as payment for debt. But when Lucien Moretti saw the terror in Serena Vale's eyes, he didn't claim her like property. He asked one question that shattered everything. Who hurt you? What she discovered next turned her world upside down. Her father had taken out a $3 million life insurance policy on her just days before handing her over. He never intended to repay a debt. He intended to profit from her death. This is a story about monsters wearing respectable faces and salvation arriving with blood on its hands. Stay with me until the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Rain came down in sheets that night, hammering the black marble driveway of the Valemon estate like bullets against armor. Serena Vale stood shivering in the downpour, her thin dress clinging to bruised skin, her father's hand gripping her upper arm hard enough to leave fresh marks over the old ones. Victor Vale didn't look at her. He never did. Not when it mattered. "Move," he said, dragging her toward the towering iron doors that loomed ahead like the gates of hell itself. Serena stumbled, her bare feet slipping on wet stone, but Victor didn't slow down. He yanked her forward with the casual violence of a man handling livestock. 25 years of this. 25 years of learning that silence kept you breathing and hope got you hurt. The doors opened before they reached them. Two men in black suits stood in the entrance, expressionless, their hands resting on the bulges beneath their jackets. They stepped aside without a word, and Victor shoved Serena through the threshold into a world that smelled like old money and fresh violence. Candlelight flickered across walls lined with oil paintings and antique weapons, the kind of place that belonged in a museum or a nightmare. Serena's heart hammered against her ribs, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps that fogged the cold air. Victor released her arm, and she nearly collapsed. "Stay," he commanded, like she was a dog. She stayed. The grand foyer stretched before them, marble floors gleaming under chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears. At the far end, double doors stood open, revealing a sitting room bathed in amber light. And in the center of that room sat a man who made the air itself feel dangerous. Lucien Moretti. Serena had heard the name whispered in courtrooms and spoken in hushed tones by men who thought they were powerful. The East Coast's most feared mafia boss. A ghost who left bodies behind and never got caught. A monster dressed in tailored suits and Italian leather. He didn't stand when they entered, didn't even look up from the glass of bourbon in his hand. Victor cleared his throat, that nervous tick he got when dealing with men who actually scared him. "Mr. Moretti, I've brought my I can see what you've brought." Lucien's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. Low, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to make men obey. He set down his glass and finally lifted his eyes. Serena felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. Dark eyes that cataloged everything. Her soaked dress, her bare feet, the way she held her left arm against her ribs because breathing hurt. The bruises shadowing her pale skin like fingerprints pressed into clay. Her father had always told her she was invisible, worthless, a burden he'd carried for too long. But Lucien Moretti saw her, and that terrified her more than anything. "Debt paid," Victor said quickly, already backing toward the door. "We're square now. The 200,000 plus interest. She's—" "Stop talking." Victor's mouth snapped shut. Lucien rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator. He was tall, broader than Victor, with dark hair swept back from a face carved from violence and survival. Tattoos crawled up his neck and disappeared beneath his black shirt. Markings Serena couldn't read but somehow understood. Each one a story. Each one a scar. He crossed the room slowly, his footsteps silent on expensive carpet. Victor took another step back. "Look, if there's a problem, get out!" 2 words, spoken softly. Victor practically ran. The doors closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut, and Serena realized with horrible clarity that she was alone with the kind of man her father owed money to, the kind of man who collected debts in flesh and blood. She waited for the violence to start, for hands to grab her, for pain to replace the numbness she'd wrapped around herself like armor. Instead, Lucien stopped 3 feet away and studied her face. "What's your name?" The question caught her off guard. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. She'd learned not to speak unless spoken to, and even then, only in the exact words required. "Serena," she finally whispered. "Serena," he repeated, like he was testing the shape of it. "How old are you?" 25. "And those bruises, how long?" Her throat closed. Questions like that didn't get asked. Not by strangers, not by anyone. Lucien's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that looked almost like recognition. He moved closer, and Serena flinched. He stopped immediately. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. She'd heard those words before. From her father. From his business partners. From every man who'd ever smiled at her mother's funeral and told her everything would be fine now. Liars, all of them. But Lucien didn't smile. Didn't make promises. Didn't touch her. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone, pressing a button and speaking without looking away from her face. "Elena, guest room, now." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You're going to eat something," he said. "Then you're going to sleep. Tomorrow, we'll talk." "About what?" The words escaped before Serena could stop them. Lucien tilted his head slightly, and for the first time, something almost human crossed his features. "About who hurt you," he said, "and what we're going to do about it." The guest room belonged in a different world. Cream-colored walls, soft lighting, a bed the size of Serena's entire childhood bedroom, covered in blankets that looked like clouds. Windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, where city lights reflected off dark water like scattered diamonds. Elena arrived within minutes, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands. She didn't ask questions, didn't stare at the bruises, just helped Serena out of the wet dress and into a robe so soft it felt like wearing air. "Bathroom's through there," Elena said, gesturing to a door Serena hadn't noticed. "Take your time. I'll bring food." She left before Serena could respond. Alone, Serena stood in the center of the room and tried to remember how to breathe normally. Her ribs ached. Her feet were cut from the driveway. Her mind kept circling back to the same impossible thought. Why wasn't she locked in a basement? Why wasn't she bleeding? Why had Lucien Moretti looked at her like she was a person instead of a transaction? The bathroom was marble and chrome, with a shower big enough for 3 people. Serena turned on the water and stood under the spray until it ran cold, washing away the rain and the touch of her father's hands and the last 25 years of learning to disappear. When she finally emerged, wrapped in the robe and dripping on expensive tile, she found a tray of food waiting on the nightstand. Soup, bread, water in a glass that didn't have cracks. Her stomach twisted with hunger she'd learned to ignore, but her hands shook too badly to lift the spoon. A knock on the door made her freeze. "It's me," Lucien's voice muffled through wood. "Can I come in?" Serena's pulse spiked. "Yes." The door opened and he stepped inside, still wearing the same black shirt and slacks. He glanced at the untouched food, then at her trembling hands. "You're afraid of me," he said. Not a question. Serena didn't answer. Answering honestly got you hurt. Lucien crossed the room and sat in the chair by the window, putting distance between them. He leaned back, arms resting on the armrests, posture open and unthreatening. "Your father owed me money," he said. "A gambling debt that got out of control. 200,000, with interest climbing every week." Serena already knew this. Victor had screamed about it often enough. "He came to me 3 weeks ago," Lucien continued. "Said he had a way to settle it. Offered me his daughter as collateral." The word hit Serena like a fist. Collateral, property, a thing to be traded. "I told him no," Lucien said. Serena's head snapped up. "What?" "I don't deal in human trafficking. I kill the men who do." Silence stretched between them, broken only by rain still hammering the windows. Then why? Because he kept pushing, sent photos, medical records, documentation proving you existed and that he had legal authority to sign you over. Lucien's jaw tightened. And in those medical records, I saw something he didn't think I'd notice. He pulled out his phone again, tapped the screen, and held it out. Serena took it with shaking hands. The document on the screen was a hospital intake form from 6 months ago. Her name at the top. Injuries listed in clinical detail. Bruised ribs, defensive wounds on forearms, contusions consistent with being struck repeatedly. Cause of injury? Fall downstairs. Her father's signature at the bottom, neat and confident. There were 23 reports over the last 10 years, Lucien said quietly. All of them signed by Victor Vale. All of them blaming accidents. Serena's vision blurred. She'd never seen these records, never knew they existed. I started digging into your father's background, Lucien continued. Philanthropist, business owner, respected community leader, perfect public image. He stood and crossed to the window, staring out at the bay. Men like him are the most dangerous kind, he said, because everyone believes the mask. Why do you care? The question came out raw, desperate. You don't know me. I'm nobody. Lucien turned, and the look in his eyes made Serena's breath catch. My mother's name was Isabella, he said. She married a man who wore expensive suits and donated to charities and smiled for cameras. And every night, he beat her until she couldn't stand. He rolled up his left sleeve, revealing a network of scars that looked like they'd been carved with broken glass. I was 8 when I tried to stop him, Lucien said. He put me through a window, told the hospital I'd fallen off my bike. Serena's throat tightened. My mother died when I was 12, he continued. Another accident, another lie everyone believed. He lowered his sleeve. I built an empire hunting men like my father, men who hide behind money and power and respectability while they destroy the people who can't fight back. He moved closer, and this time Serena didn't flinch. So when Victor Vale offered me his daughter like she was a poker chip, Lucien said softly, I took the deal, not because I wanted to own you, but because I wanted to see what he'd done, who he'd hurt, and how deep the rot went. Serena's hands curled into fists, the phone still clutched between her fingers. You could have just told the police. The police work for men like your father. They golf together, drink together, cover for each other. Lucien's expression hardened. Justice doesn't come from systems designed to protect predators. Then where does it come from? He met her eyes. From people willing to become monsters to stop them. Serena didn't sleep that night. She lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through years of violence she'd normalized because survival required it. The slaps that came whenever she spoke too loudly, the shoves downstairs that looked like accidents, the isolation that kept her from friends, from school, from anyone who might notice. Her father had been careful, methodical. And now she was here, in the home of a mafia boss who claimed he wanted to help her. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep and moved to the window. The bay stretched out below, dark and vast, dotted with the lights of boats and distant buildings. Somewhere out there, her father was probably celebrating, thinking he'd finally gotten rid of the burden he'd carried for 25 years. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. Come in, she said, not bothering to turn around. The door opened and Elena entered carrying a mug of something that smelled like chamomile and honey. Thought you might need this, she said, setting it on the nightstand. Serena finally turned. Does he do this often? Bring people here? Elena's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something gentler than neutrality. Mr. Moretti has a specific kind of conscience, she said carefully. He sees the world in terms of predators and prey. And he spent most of his life making sure the predators pay. By killing them? Sometimes. Elena straightened a pillow that didn't need straightening. Sometimes by destroying everything they've built. Their reputations, their power, their ability to hurt anyone else. And me? What am I in his world? Elena met her eyes directly. Proof that his mother's death wasn't meaningless. The words settled over Serena like a weighted blanket. Heavy, but somehow comforting. Get some rest, Elena said. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. She left, and Serena was alone again with her thoughts and the chamomile tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. Morning came with pale sunlight cutting through expensive curtains. Serena woke to find clothes laid out on the chair. Jeans, a soft sweater, undergarments still in packaging. Her size. She didn't want to think about how Lucien had known. She dressed slowly, her body protesting every movement. The bruises had darkened overnight, painting her skin in shades of purple and yellow that told stories she'd never been allowed to speak aloud. When she emerged from the guest room, she found Lucien in the kitchen. The space was massive, all stainless steel and black granite, with windows overlooking a garden that seemed impossible in Miami. He stood at the counter, pouring coffee into 2 mugs, wearing a simple black t-shirt that revealed more of the tattoos covering his arms. Names, she realized. Dozens of them, written in different scripts and languages. "They're people I couldn't save," Lucien said without turning around. Reminders that hesitation costs lives. He held out one of the mugs. Serena took it, the warmth seeping into her cold hands. "I need to know something," Lucien said, leaning against the counter. "And I need you to be honest, because what happens next depends on your answer." Serena's grip tightened on the mug. "Okay. Do you want to go back to him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Every survival instinct Serena had screamed at her to say yes, to be agreeable, to not cause problems. Victor was her father, her legal guardian, the man the world saw as a saint. But standing in this kitchen, with bruises aching beneath her clothes and a mafia boss looking at her like she was worth more than the debt her father owed. "No," she whispered. Then louder. "No, I never want to see him again." Something shifted in Lucien's expression, not quite relief, not quite satisfaction, something darker and more purposeful. "Good," he said. "Because I found something else." He pulled out his phone, tapped through several screens, and turned it toward her. The document on the screen was an insurance policy. Beneficiary, Victor Vale. Insured, Serena Vale. Death benefit, $3 million. Date of issue, 3 days before Victor had brought her here. Serena's vision tunneled. The mug slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor, coffee spreading across Italian tile like blood. "He was going to kill me," she said, the words distant and hollow. "He was going to hand me over and collect the money when I died." Yes. No comfort, no softening, just brutal honesty. Serena's knees buckled, and suddenly Lucien was there, his hands catching her elbows, holding her upright with a gentleness that didn't match the violence in his eyes. "I need you to understand something," he said, his face inches from hers. "Your father is a monster. A predator who's been protected by money and reputation for so long he thinks he's untouchable." Tears burned Serena's eyes. "What am I supposed to do?" Lucien's grip tightened, not painful, anchoring. "You have 2 choices," he said. "Walk away. I'll give you money, resources, a new identity. You can disappear and never look back. And the other choice?" His eyes held hers, dark and steady and absolutely certain. "Burn him to the ground. Bet." Serena chose fire. Over the next 2 weeks, she learned that Lucien Moretti's empire wasn't built on drugs or prostitution or the crimes people assumed. It was built on information. He had hackers who could crack government databases, accountants who tracked offshore money, lawyers who knew exactly which laws men like Victor Vale broke while pretending to uphold them. And he had connections everywhere: police, politicians, judges, people who owed him favors or feared him enough to cooperate. Serena spent hours in Lucien's office, watching him dismantle her father's life piece by piece. Bank records showing charity fraud. Victor had been funneling donations into private accounts for years, using the nonprofit he ran as his personal piggy bank. Political contributions traced back to shell companies. He'd been bribing city officials to overlook building code violations and environmental regulations. Medical records going back to Serena's childhood, proof that every accident had been a cover for abuse. And the insurance policy, purchased right after Victor's gambling debts had reached the breaking point. "He's been planning this for months," Lucien said, spreading documents across the massive table in his office. "Maybe longer." Serena stared at her father's signature on form after form, each one a calculated step toward her murder. "Why?" she asked. "Why not just leave, disappear? Why go through all this?" Lucien looked up from the papers. "Because men like him need to win. Walking away would be admitting defeat. But staging your death, collecting $3 million and playing the grieving father?" He shook his head. "That's a perfect ending to him." Rage built in Serena's chest, hot and unfamiliar. 25 years of swallowing anger. 25 years of making herself small and quiet and obedient. No more. "What's the plan?" she asked. Lucien smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that didn't reach his eyes. We give him exactly what he wants, he said. A stage, an audience, a moment of triumph. He pulled out a gilded invitation and slid it across the table. The Venetian Royale Ballroom, Victor Vale's humanitarian award ceremony. 3 weeks away. He's going to stand in front of 500 people and accept an award for saving lives, Lucien said, and we're going to make sure everyone sees the truth. Serena picked up the invitation, her fingers trembling. How? Leave that to me, Lucien said. I need you to focus on one thing. What? He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. Staying alive. The threat came on a Tuesday. Serena was in the garden trying to process everything when Elena appeared in the doorway with an expression that made Serena's stomach drop. He's here, Elena said quietly. Who? Your father. Ice flooded Serena's veins. How did he? He's at the gate, demanding to see you. Lucien materialized behind Elena, his face carved from stone. Stay here. No. Serena stood, surprising herself. I want to see him. Serena, I need to see him. Her voice shook, but her legs stayed steady. I need to look him in the eye and know I'm not afraid anymore. Lucien studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we do this my way. He led her to the security room, a space filled with monitors showing every angle of the property. On the largest screen, Victor Vale stood at the iron gates, looking smaller than Serena remembered. Weaker. Lucien pressed a button, and Victor's voice crackled through speakers. No, you have her. I'm her father. You can't keep her from me. Watch, Lucien said softly, pressing another button. His voice filled the air, amplified and cold. Mr. Vale, your daughter is here of her own free will. Bullshit! You kidnapped her. I'll call the police. Please do, Lucien said. I'm sure they'd be very interested in the insurance policy you took out 3 days before selling her to me. Silence. On the screen, Victor's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Lucien gestured to Serena. Your turn. She stepped closer to the microphone, her heart hammering. Hi, Dad. Victor's head snapped toward the camera. Serena, sweetheart, whatever he's told you, I know about the insurance policy. The words came out steady, clear. I know you plan to kill me. That's insane. He's manipulating you. I saw the documents. Your signature, the date. Serena's voice hardened. You sold me to pay off your gambling debts, and when that wasn't enough, you decided I was worth more dead than alive. You don't understand. I understand that you've been beating me since I was 7 years old. I understand that every hospital visit was a lie. Every accident was you. Her hands curled into fists. And I understand that you're never going to touch me again. Victor's mask cracked completely. Rage replaced the false concern, twisting his features into something ugly and familiar. You ungrateful little... He caught himself, glancing at the camera. I gave you everything. A home, food, clothing. You gave me bruises and fear and 25 years of wishing I didn't exist. After everything I sacrificed, you sacrificed nothing, Serena's voice cracked. Mom died and you blamed me, and you've been punishing me for it ever since. Victor's face went red. Your mother was weak, just like you, and when I finally find a way to be free of you, you... He stopped, realizing what he'd said. Lucien leaned closer to the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Vale, he said softly. That confession will be very useful. Victor's eyes widened. You're recording this? Every word. Victor lunged at the gate, shaking it with impotent rage. You can't do this. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. No, Lucien said. You won't. Because in 3 weeks, you're going to stand in front of Miami's elite and accept your humanitarian award, and I'm going to make sure they see exactly who you are. He ended the connection and the monitors went dark. Serena stood in the sudden silence, her whole body shaking. She'd done it, confronted him, spoken the truth, and she was still standing. Lucien's hand touched her shoulder, light, careful, asking permission. She turned and collapsed against him, tears finally breaking free as 25 years of terror and rage poured out in gasping sobs. He held her while she shattered, his arms solid and steady. And for the first time in her life, Serena understood what safety felt like. It felt like being seen. It felt like being believed. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm with someone who refused to let her fall. When she finally pulled away, her face wet and her eyes swollen, Lucien handed her a handkerchief without a word. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For asking who hurt me." Something shifted in his expression, grief maybe, or recognition of pain that matched his own. "Someone should have asked you years ago," he said quietly. Serena wiped her face, her breath still hitching. "What happens now?" Lucien's eyes hardened back into the calculated predator she'd met that first night. "Now," he said, "we finish this." The days after Victor's appearance at the gate felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Serena could feel the heat building, the walls closing in, even though she was safer than she'd ever been in her life. Safe didn't mean calm. Lucien moved through the house like a man preparing for war. Phone calls at 3 a.m. Meetings behind closed doors. Strangers arriving and leaving at all hours. Men and women in expensive suits who didn't make eye contact and never stayed long. Serena watched it all from the margins, trying to understand the machinery of revenge. On the fourth day, she found Lucien in his office at 2 p.m, surrounded by documents and half-empty coffee cups. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was tight with the kind of tension that came from holding too much inside for too long. "You need to rest," Serena said from the doorway. He didn't look up. "Can't." "Why not?" "Because your father's lawyers filed a missing person report yesterday." He finally met her eyes. "They're claiming I kidnapped you." Ice slid down Serena's spine. "What?" "Victor's playing the concerned parent, says you were coerced, that I'm holding you against your will." Lucien tossed a legal document across the desk. "He's got 3 character witnesses ready to testify that you'd never leave him voluntarily." Serena crossed to the desk and picked up the paper. The words blurred together, but she caught enough. Unlawful detention, mental manipulation, demand for immediate return of Serena Vale to her legal guardian. "He's 25, she said, her voice hollow. "I'm an adult. Doesn't matter if he can prove you're mentally unstable, traumatized, vulnerable to manipulation." Lucien's expression darkened. "And he's got medical records showing a history of anxiety and depression, records he created every time he sent you to the hospital with injuries he caused." The paper crumpled in Serena's fist. "So he beats me for 25 years, documents it as mental illness, and now uses it to claim I can't make my own decisions?" "That's exactly what he's doing." Rage burned through her chest, hot and acidic. "Then I'll tell them the truth. I'll testify that your testimony won't matter." Lucien stood, circling the desk. Not against a respected philanthropist with decades of community service and a daughter with a documented history of instability. "They'll say I brainwashed you, that you're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. That's insane. That's the system." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion carving lines into his face. "Men like your father built it to protect themselves." Serena's hands shook. "So what do we do?" "We accelerate the timeline." Lucien pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. "The award ceremony is in 2 weeks. We were going to wait, build a stronger case. But if Victor forces a court hearing before then, we lose. Silence settled over the office, heavy and suffocating. "What if I went back?" Serena heard herself say. Lucien's head snapped up. "What?" "Just temporarily. Play the repentant daughter, tell him I was confused, scared, manipulated." The words tasted like poison, but she forced them out. "Get close enough to find something we can use." "No." "Lucien, I said no." His voice went cold, the kind of cold that made grown men flinch. "You're not going back to him." "Why not? It's the logical—" "Because he'll kill you!" The words exploded out of him, raw and jagged. "The second you're back under his roof, you become a liability, a witness who knows too much. He won't wait for the insurance payout. He'll stage an accident and bury you before anyone can stop him." Serena's breath caught. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Lucien turned away, his shoulders rigid. "Because I've seen it happen before." The confession hung in the air like smoke. "Who?" Serena asked softly. Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Sofia Ruiz, 23. Father was a state senator. Came to me 6 years ago asking for help getting away from him. His hands curled into fists. I told her to give me 2 weeks to build a case. Convinced her to go home, act normal, buy me time. Serena's stomach dropped. She lasted 4 days, Lucien said, his voice barely above a whisper. Fell down the stairs. Broken neck. Her father gave a tearful speech at her funeral about mental illness and tragic accidents. He finally turned, and the look in his eyes made Serena's chest ache. I swore I'd never make that mistake again, he said. So no, you're not going back. We find another way. Before Serena could respond, the office door burst open. A man she'd never seen before strode in, tall, lean, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. He wore a suit that cost more than most cars and carried himself like someone used to being obeyed. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Lucien's entire demeanor shifted. Marcus, I told you to call first. Couldn't. Phone's probably tapped. Marcus's gaze flicked to Serena, assessing and dismissing in the same breath. Victor Vale just filed an emergency injunction. Judge Morrison signed it 30 minutes ago. What kind of injunction? The kind that gives him legal authority to forcibly retrieve his daughter with police escort. Marcus pulled out his own phone, showing Lucien the screen. They're coming here, today, within the hour. The floor dropped out from under Serena's feet. Lucien moved instantly, his mind already 3 steps ahead. Elena! She appeared in the doorway as if summoned. I heard. Already packing. No, Marcus said sharply. Running makes her look guilty, makes you look guilty. You want to hand Victor the narrative that you kidnapped her? I'm not handing her over to him. You don't have a choice. Marcus's voice stayed level, infuriatingly calm. Morrison's not in Victor's pocket yet, but if you resist a legal court order, he will be, and every other judge in Miami will line up behind him. Lucien's jaw worked. There has to be another option. There is. Marcus looked at Serena. She goes back willingly. No police escort, no drama, just a daughter returning to her concerned father. Absolutely not, Lucien said. But Serena's mind was already moving, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. He's right, she said quietly. Both men turned to stare at her. If I run, I look like I'm being controlled, she continued, her voice gaining strength. But if I walk back in on my own terms, it shows I have agency, free will. It also puts you in immediate danger, Lucien said. Only if he knows I'm a threat. Serena met his eyes. What if I'm not? What if I'm just the broken daughter who missed her father? You can't act your way through this. Why not? I've been acting for 25 years. The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. I know exactly how to be what he wants. Small, quiet, obedient, until he decides you're a liability. Which is why we don't give him time to think. She turned to Marcus. How long do we have before the police arrive? 40 minutes, maybe less. And how long until the award ceremony? 13 days. Serena looked back at Lucien. 13 days. I can survive 13 days. You don't know that. Neither do you. She stepped closer, close enough to see the fear beneath his anger. But I know what happens if I don't try. Victor wins. The police force me back anyway, and you lose all credibility. I don't care about credibility. I do. The words came out harder than she intended. Because if we lose now, he'll never pay for what he did. Not just to me. To everyone else he's hurt. Everyone he'll hurt in the future. Lucien's hands trembled slightly before he shoved them in his pockets. Sophia said the same thing. I'm not Sophia. How do you know? Because she didn't have you watching her back. Something cracked in his expression. Not quite hope. Not quite surrender, something rawer. Marcus cleared his throat. We're wasting time. If we're doing this, we need to move now. Lucien didn't respond for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded once, short and sharp. Fine, but we do it my way. 30 minutes later, Serena sat in the back of a black sedan, watching the Moretti estate disappear in the rearview mirror. Lucien sat beside her, his phone pressed to his ear, issuing orders in a voice that cut like a scalpel. I want eyes on the house 24/7, traffic cameras, drones, anything that gives us visual confirmation. I don't care what it costs. If she so much as looks distressed, we extract her immediately." He ended the call and looked at Serena. "You have a panic button." He pressed something into her hand, a small silver pendant on a delicate chain. It looked like jewelry. Normal. Innocent. "Press the center and hold for 3 seconds, Lucien said. "Signal goes directly to me. 5-minute response time maximum." Serena fastened it around her neck. The metal felt cold against her skin. "What if he takes it?" she asked. "Then you text me the word Dove. I'll have someone monitoring your phone." "What if he takes my phone?" Lucien's expression went flat. "Then you find a window and break it. Scream, make noise. Someone will hear you." "And if they don't?" He reached out, his hand hovering near her face before settling gently against her jaw. The same scar he'd noticed that first night, now fading but still visible. "Then I burn Miami to the ground finding you," he said quietly. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. The car pulled up to the Vale estate 20 minutes later. The house looked exactly as Serena remembered. White columns, manicured lawn, the kind of place that belonged on magazine covers. Beautiful on the outside, rotting from within. Victor stood on the front steps, flanked by 2 lawyers in identical gray suits. He'd practiced his expression. Concerned father, relieved parent, nothing that suggested the rage Serena had seen through the security monitors. The driver opened her door. Lucien caught her wrist. "Last chance to change your mind." "I won't." 13 days. 13 days, she echoed. She stepped out of the car. Victor moved forward immediately, arms spread wide in a gesture meant for the cameras Serena knew were recording from somewhere nearby. "Serena! Thank God! I was so worried." "Hi, Dad." Her voice came out flat, mechanical. His arms dropped slightly, uncertainty flickering across his face. Then he recovered, closing the distance and pulling her into a hug that felt like being wrapped in barbed wire. "It's okay now," he murmured against her hair, loud enough for the lawyers to hear. "You're home. Everything's going to be okay." Serena stood rigid in his embrace, her eyes finding Lucien still standing beside the car. He looked like carved stone, immovable. His hands were clenched at his sides, and she could see the effort it took for him not to intervene. She mouthed 2 words, "Trust me." Then Victor pulled her toward the house, and the door closed behind them, and Serena was alone with the monster who'd raised her. The first 3 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Victor didn't hit her, didn't yell, didn't do anything that would leave visible marks or recordable evidence. Instead, he isolated her, took her phone for her own protection, locked her bedroom door at night to keep her safe, monitored every meal, every bathroom trip, every moment of her existence. And he talked. Constant, grinding conversation designed to break her down piece by piece. "I forgive you for running away. You were confused. That man manipulated you. I've always loved you. Everything I did was for your own good. Your mother would be ashamed of how you've behaved." The lies came smooth and practiced, each one a nail driven into her sense of reality. But Serena had learned something during her time with Lucien. How to lie back. So she nodded, agreed, played the repentant daughter with a skill born from decades of survival. And she watched. Victor met with lawyers daily, made phone calls behind closed doors, worked on his award ceremony speech with the obsessive focus of a man who believed his own mythology. Serena caught fragments of conversations through walls. "Police are satisfied she's here voluntarily. Moretti can't touch us now without proving he had malicious intent. Ceremony proceeds as planned. After that, the sentences cut off before she could hear the endings. But she didn't need full conversations to understand. Victor was planning something for after the ceremony, something final. On the 4th night, Serena lay in her locked bedroom and pressed the pendant around her neck. Not the panic button, just touching it, reminding herself it was there. 13 days had become 9. She could make it 9 more days. She had to. Mates. The breakthrough came on day 6. Victor hosted a dinner party, business associates and political connections celebrating his upcoming award. Serena was required to attend, dressed in a white dress that made her look virginal and fragile. Exactly the image Victor wanted to project. She smiled through conversations with men who praised her father's generosity, nodded politely when women commented on how lovely she looked, played the perfect daughter while rage burned beneath her skin like acid. Then late in the evening, she overheard something that changed everything. Two men stood near the bar, drinks in hand, voices low, but not quite low enough. Can't believe he's actually going to do it. Why not? The policy's active. Once he gets the award, there's nothing tying him to the girl anymore. Still, his own daughter. She's a loose end. Vale doesn't leave loose ends. Serena's blood turned to ice. She moved past them quickly, maintaining her practiced smile, and slipped into the hallway leading to Victor's study. The door was closed but not locked. He never expected her to have the courage to snoop. She went inside and started searching. Files on the desk. Nothing. Drawers. Nothing. Computer locked. Then she saw it. A leather planner lying open beside his keyboard. She flipped through pages, her hands shaking, scanning dates and appointments until she found it. 2 days after the award ceremony. An appointment marked simply, finalize. And beneath it, written in Victor's neat handwriting, accident, car brake line, remote location, police contacts confirmed. Serena's vision blurred. He wasn't going to wait for the insurance investigation. He was going to kill her immediately after the ceremony and make it look like a car accident. She pulled out her phone. Except she didn't have her phone. Victor had taken it. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't leave the planner here. Couldn't risk Victor noticing she'd seen it. But she also couldn't take it without him knowing. She grabbed her phone from her purse, the emergency one Lucien had hidden inside the lining, a spare she'd found the second day back. She photographed every page. The appointments, the notes, the chilling confirmation of premeditated murder written in her father's own hand. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway. She shoved the phone back into her purse, closed the planner exactly as she'd found it, and slipped toward the door. It opened before she reached it. Victor stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing in here?" Serena's mind raced. "I was looking for you. One of your guests wanted to speak with you about the foundation." His eyes narrowed. "Which guest?" "Mr. Henderson, the one with the gray beard." A lie. There was no Henderson. Victor stared at her for 3 long seconds, then he nodded slowly. "Get back to the party." She moved past him, her legs somehow still working despite the terror screaming through her nervous system. Behind her, she heard Victor step into his study, heard the quiet sound of him checking his desk. Serena didn't run, didn't look back. She walked calmly to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out the phone with shaking hands. She opened the texting app, found Lucien's number, typed, "Dove, brake lines, 2 days after ceremony, photos attached." She hit send and watched the message disappear into the ether. Then she deleted the conversation, powered off the phone, and buried it back in her purse lining. When she rejoined the party 5 minutes later, Victor was watching her from across the room. His smile never reached his eyes. Lucien called an emergency meeting at midnight. Serena didn't know this. She was locked in her bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering if Victor suspected anything. But across town, in a warehouse owned by shell companies and hidden from public records, Lucien stood in front of a table full of evidence and 6 people who owed him their lives. "We move up the timeline," he said without preamble. Marcus, his lawyer, shook his head. "The ceremony's in 7 days. We're not ready." "We're ready enough." Lucien threw Serena's photos onto the table. He's planning to kill her 2 days after, which means we have 9 days, not 13. A woman named Rosa, one of Lucien's hackers, picked up the images, her expression darkening. "This is premeditated murder. Why not just take it to the police?" "Because the police are on his payroll." Lucien pointed to one of the notes in Victor's planner. "Police contacts confirmed. He's got cops ready to classify it as an accident." "Then we extract her now," said James, Lucien's head of security. "Tonight. Get her out of there before, and prove everything Victor's been saying, that I kidnapped her, that she's being controlled." Lucien's voice went cold. "No, we stick to the plan, but we accelerate." "How?" Marcus asked. Lucien pulled up a digital blueprint of the Venetian Royal ballroom on his tablet. The award ceremony happens in front of 500 people, press, politicians, live streaming to donors across the country. He zoomed in on the AV system. We're going to hijack every screen in that building and show them exactly who Victor Vale is. We already planned that, Rosa said. What's different? Timing. Lucien's finger stabbed at the timeline. We were going to wait until after his speech, give him rope to hang himself. But now we do it the second he steps on stage, before he has a chance to control the narrative. That's risky, Marcus said. If we blow our shot, we won't. How do you know? Lucien's eyes were black and pitiless. Because failure means Serena dies, and that's not an option. The room went silent. Finally, Rosa nodded. I'll need access to the venue's network. 3 days minimum to crack their security. You have 2. Lucien. 2 days, Rosa. Make it work. She sighed but nodded. James stepped forward. What about physical security? Vale's going to have private security, and the venue will have their own team. I'm handling security. Lucien pulled up another file. I've got contacts in the company they hired. They'll look the other way when we need them to. And if they don't? Then I make them. Marcus rubbed his temples. This is going to cost a fortune. I don't care what it costs. Lucien, I don't care. Each word came out like a hammer strike. Money is meaningless if she's dead. The admission hung in the air. Marcus and Rosa exchanged glances. Okay, Marcus said finally. We're in. But if this goes sideways, it won't. But if it does, you need to be ready to disappear. Victor will come after you with everything he has. Lucien's expression didn't change. Let him try. 7 days. Serena marked them in her mind like a prisoner counting down to execution. Victor's behavior shifted after the dinner party. He watched her constantly, checked her room for contraband, monitored every bite of food she ate, every word she spoke. But he didn't find the phone. Serena had hidden it inside a tampon box, the one place she knew Victor would never search. At night, after he locked her in, she pulled it out and read Lucien's messages. 6 days. Stay strong. 5 days? Rosa cracked the network. 4 days. Security is handled. 3 days? Almost there. Each message felt like a lifeline thrown across an impossible distance. But Victor was getting worse. On the 3rd day before the ceremony, he sat her down in his study and laid out her role for the event. You'll stand beside me during the speech, he said, his tone pleasant, but his eyes dead. Smile. Look proud. Show everyone that you're happy to be home. Okay, Serena said quietly. And afterward, we're taking a trip, just the 2 of us. Father-daughter bonding time. Her blood went cold. Where? The Everglades. I've rented a cabin. Very private, very remote. He smiled. We leave the morning after the ceremony. The morning of her planned accident. Serena forced her expression to stay neutral. That sounds nice. I thought so. Victor stood, moving around the desk. You know, I really am proud of you, Serena. For what? For finally understanding your place. He reached out, touching her hair with a gentleness that made her skin crawl. Your mother never understood. She fought me, questioned me, made everything so much harder than it needed to be. Serena's throat closed. But you, Victor continued, you've learned. You know when to be obedient, when to keep quiet. His hand slid to her shoulder, gripping just hard enough to hurt. That's why I know you won't do anything stupid at the ceremony. It wasn't a statement, it was a threat. I won't, Serena whispered. Good. He released her, his smile widening. Because if you do, there are consequences. Not just for you, for anyone who helped you. I understand. Do you? Because I know about Lucien Moretti's little setup, the surveillance, the people watching the house. Victor leaned close enough that she could smell the expensive cologne he wore. And I know that accidents can happen to anyone, even mafia bosses who think they're untouchable. Serena's heart stopped. If you try to embarrass me at the ceremony, Victor said softly, Lucien Moretti dies the same night. Car bomb, gas leak. I haven't decided yet. But it will be public, messy, and everyone will know it was because of you. He straightened, fixing his tie. So you're going to stand beside me, smile, play your role, and afterward, we're going to take our trip. Understand? Serena's mind raced. If she warned Lucien he'd call everything off, Victor would win, the insurance policy would stay active, and eventually Victor would find another way to kill her. But if she didn't warn him... I understand, she heard herself say. Victor patted her cheek. That's my girl. He left her sitting in his study, alone with the knowledge that no matter what she chose, someone was going to die. 10. That night, Serena pulled out the phone. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She should tell Lucien, warn him about Victor's threat, let him make the decision. But if she did, he'd abort the plan. She knew him well enough to know that. And then what? She'd be stuck here. Victor would carry out his accident in the Everglades, and no one would ever know the truth. Sophia's voice echoed in her memory. A woman she'd never met but somehow knew intimately. A woman who'd trusted someone to save her and died waiting for rescue. Serena wasn't going to wait for rescue. She opened a new message, typed, "Change of plan. I'm going to stand beside him during the speech. He's expecting me to be compliant. Use that." She stared at the words for a long moment, then added, "Don't abort, no matter what happens." Her finger hovered over the send button. This was it. The point of no return. If she sent this message, she was committing to walking into that ballroom knowing Victor planned to kill Lucien if she stepped out of line. But she was also committing to destroying her father in front of everyone he'd ever manipulated, to becoming the kind of person who chose justice over safety. Serena thought about her mother, about Sophia, about every woman who died because they waited for someone else to save them. She hit send. The message disappeared. 3 seconds later, her phone buzzed. "Lucien, are you safe right now?" Serena. "Yes?" Lucien. "What happened?" She almost told him, almost explained about the threats and the surveillance and the impossible choice Victor had forced on her. Instead, she typed, "I need to be there. On stage. That's the only way this works." A long pause. Then, "This is dangerous." Serena. "I know." Lucien. "If something goes wrong..." Serena. "It won't. Trust me." Another pause. Longer this time. Finally. 2 days. Serena. 2 days. She powered off the phone, buried it back in its hiding place, and lay down in bed. Sleep wouldn't come. But for the first time in her life, Serena wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready to burn it all down. Ugh. The morning of the ceremony arrived gray and humid. Victor woke Serena early, his mood almost cheerful. "Big day," he said through her locked door. "I had breakfast brought up. Eat. We leave for the venue at 4. Serena forced down eggs and toast that tasted like ash. She showered under water that felt too hot, scrubbing her skin until it hurt. She dressed in the gown Victor had chosen, champagne silk that made her look delicate and expensive. A daughter worthy of standing beside a humanitarian. Elena had somehow managed to deliver makeup through one of the staff members still loyal to her. Not much, just enough to cover the fading bruises and make Serena look human. At 3:30, Victor knocked on her door. "Ready?" Serena looked at herself in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back looked nothing like the terrified girl who'd been shoved through iron gates 3 weeks ago. This woman had fire in her eyes. "Ready," she said. Victor drove them to the Venetian Royal Ballroom in his pristine Mercedes, chatting pleasantly about the people who would be there, the speech he'd prepared, the future he'd planned, a future that included Serena's death in the Everglades. She sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, the pendant around her neck hidden beneath her dress. The ballroom appeared ahead, white marble and gold trim, lit up like a palace. Hundreds of people were already arriving, men in tuxedos, women in designer gowns, cameras everywhere. Victor pulled into the VIP entrance and immediately they were surrounded by photographers and reporters shouting questions. He smiled his practiced smile, waving like a politician. Then he opened Serena's door and offered his hand. She took it, stepping out into camera flashes that felt like machine gun fire. "Mr. Vale, is it true your daughter was missing? Serena, how do you feel about your father's award? Are the rumors true about..." Victor raised a hand, silencing them with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "My daughter and I are incredibly grateful for this honor," he said smoothly, "and we're looking forward to a wonderful evening celebrating the Foundation's work." He kept his arm around Serena's shoulders, gripped tight enough to leave marks. Together, they walked through the doors into the ballroom where 500 people waited to worship a monster. And somewhere in that crowd, hidden among the wealthy and powerful, Lucien Moretti watched with his finger on the trigger of the plan that would either save Serena's life or end them both. The chandelier crystals caught the light like knives. The orchestra played something classical and beautiful, and Serena took her place beside her father on a stage built for his triumph, knowing that in the next hour, one of them would be destroyed completely. She just had to make sure it was him. The Venetian Royale ballroom glowed like a cathedral built for the corrupt. Crystal chandeliers dripped gold across 500 faces that had spent decades perfecting the art of looking respectable while their hands stayed dirty. Politicians who'd taken bribes, CEOs who'd buried scandals, philanthropists who laundered reputations through charity galas exactly like this one. Serena stood at the edge of the stage, Victor's hand resting on her shoulder like a brand, and watched them applaud her father as if he were something holy. The orchestra finished its piece. Silence settled over the room, thick and expectant. A woman in a navy suit approached the podium, Margaret Chen, president of the Miami Humanitarian Council. Her smile was warm and genuine, completely unaware she was about to hand an award to a man who'd spent 25 years beating his daughter. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret began, her voice amplified through speakers that made every word feel like a judgment. "Tonight, we honor a man whose dedication to serving our community has touched countless lives." Applause rippled through the crowd. Serena's fingers found the pendant hidden beneath her dress. Not pressing it, just touching it, reminding herself that somewhere in this room, Lucien was watching. "Victor Vale has given more than money," Margaret continued. "He's given his time, his energy, his heart to ensuring that Miami's most vulnerable citizens receive the care they deserve." More applause. Louder now. Victor's grip on Serena's shoulder tightened fractionally. A warning, a reminder of what would happen if she stepped out of line. She thought about his threat, about Lucien dying in a car bomb, about the choice she'd made 2 nights ago when she sent that message. No matter what happens. "Please join me in welcoming this year's recipient of the Beacon of Hope Award," Margaret said, stepping aside. "Victor Vale." The ballroom erupted, 500 people on their feet, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters recording every moment for tomorrow's headlines. Victor released Serena's shoulder and walked to the podium with the confident stride of a man who believed his own lies. He shook Margaret's hand, accepted the crystal trophy, and turned to face his audience. His smile was perfect, practiced. The mask he'd worn for so long it had fused to his skin. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with false emotion. "This honor means more to me than you could possibly know." Serena stood frozen at the side of the stage, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. The moment Lucien's plan would either work or fail catastrophically. She scanned the crowd, looking for him, but the lights made it impossible to see past the first few rows. Victor continued his speech, words flowing like honey. "When I lost my beloved wife 12 years ago, I thought my life was over. She was my compass, my light. And without her..." His voice cracked perfectly on cue. Serena felt bile rise in her throat. Her mother had died because Victor pushed her down the stairs during an argument. Serena had watched it happen, had been too terrified to tell anyone the truth. "I realized I had a choice," Victor went on. "I could let grief consume me, or I could honor her memory by helping others." The audience leaned forward, captivated. "So I dedicated myself to building something that would make her proud. The Vale Foundation has provided medical care to over 10,000 families, scholarships to 500 students, housing assistance to..." Every screen in the ballroom flickered. Victor paused mid-sentence, glancing at the giant LED walls flanking the stage. The screens went black. Then they came alive with something that made Serena's blood freeze. Not the evidence she expected, not bank records or insurance policies or proof of fraud. Instead, a video played, security camera footage from inside the Moretti estate, showing Serena and Lucien in his office. The timestamp read 2 weeks ago, the day after Victor had appeared at the gate. Serena watched herself on screen, standing close to Lucien, their heads bent together over documents spread across his desk. Then the audio kicked in. "Need him to believe I'm coming back willingly," Serena's voice said through the speakers. Play the broken daughter. Get close enough to find something we can use. Lucien's response, and if he suspects? He won't. I know exactly how to manipulate him. Serena's stomach dropped through the floor. This wasn't real. This conversation had never happened. But it looked real. Sounded real. The video quality was perfect. The audio seamless. Her voice and Lucien's blended together into something that looked like a conspiracy. Victor turned slowly to look at her, and the expression on his face was pure triumph. He'd known. All along, he'd known. The video continued playing across every screen in the ballroom. More footage. More conversations. All of them fabricated, but absolutely convincing. Serena planning to extort money from Victor. Lucien coaching her on how to fake distress. The two of them discussing how to destroy Victor's reputation for financial gain. The audience's applause had died. Now there was only shocked silence as 500 people watched evidence of what appeared to be an elaborate blackmail scheme. Victor stepped back to the microphone, his voice breaking with perfect artificial pain. I didn't want to believe it, he said, and actual tears glinted in his eyes. How long had he practiced that? When my daughter disappeared, I told myself she'd been taken against her will, coerced by a dangerous man. He gestured to the screens where the fabricated footage kept playing. But the truth, Victor continued, is so much worse. My own daughter, the child I raised and loved and protected, conspired with a known criminal to extort me, to destroy everything I've built, to turn my moment of recognition into a weapon against me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Shock, disgust, pity for Victor. Serena couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her entire body had turned to ice. This was why Victor had let her come back so easily. Why he'd monitored her but never seemed truly worried. He'd been planning this all along, setting the trap, waiting for her to walk into it. Margaret Chen approached Victor, her face a mask of concern. Mr. Vale, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Victor said, his voice steady now, righteous. Be sorry for her. My daughter is clearly unwell, traumatized, being manipulated by a man who saw an opportunity to profit from her pain. He looked directly at Serena, and the expression in his eyes was the one she remembered from childhood. Cold, calculating, absolute. I forgive you, sweetheart, he said softly into the microphone, and I'm going to get you the help you need. The screens changed again. Now they showed documents, medical records, psychiatric evaluations, all forged, Serena realized with dawning horror, all showing a pattern of mental illness, paranoid delusions, manipulation by authority figures, a comprehensive case for why Serena Vale couldn't be trusted, why her testimony was meaningless, why anything she said about her father would be dismissed as the ravings of a sick mind being controlled by a criminal. Victor had just destroyed her credibility in front of everyone who mattered, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The ballroom doors burst open. 6 police officers entered, moving with purpose toward the stage. Victor Vale, the lead officer said, his voice cutting through the chaos. You need to come with us. For the first time, genuine surprise crossed Victor's face. What? Why? We have a warrant for your arrest. Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted homicide. Relief flooded through Serena so suddenly her knees nearly buckled. Lucien had done it. Despite the fake video, despite Victor's plan, they had him. But Victor's expression shifted from surprise to something else, something darker. He smiled. I think you'll find, Victor said calmly, that warrant was issued based on falsified evidence provided by Lucien Moretti, evidence that has been thoroughly debunked by the footage you just saw. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen and holding it up for the lead officer to see. I filed a complaint 3 days ago, Victor continued, against Mr. Moretti for extortion, blackmail, and conspiracy. The district attorney's office has already opened an investigation. The officer's face went blank. Professional. He glanced at his phone, reading something that made his expression harden. Then he looked at Serena. Miss Vale, we're going to need you to come with us as well. Ice water flooded Serena's veins. What? You're being detained for questioning regarding your involvement in a conspiracy to defraud and extort Victor Vale. That's not... I didn't... But the officer was already moving toward her, handcuffs glinting under the chandelier light. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The screens flickered again. And this time, what appeared made Serena's world disintegrate completely. More security footage, this time from 3 weeks ago, the night Victor had brought her to Lucien's estate. But the footage had been edited, doctored, made to look like Serena had walked in willingly, smiling, laughing with Lucien like they'd known each other for years, like the whole thing had been staged from the beginning. "My daughter has been conspiring with Lucien Moretti for months," Victor said, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "Planning to extort me during my moment of greatest honor, but I want everyone here to know." He turned to Serena, his eyes wet with crocodile tears. "I forgive her. She's sick, confused, and I'm going to make sure she gets the treatment she needs." Treatment. The word hung in the air like a noose. Institutionalization. That was Victor's endgame. Lock her away in a psychiatric facility where her testimony would be worthless and her credibility shattered forever. The officer reached for Serena's arm. She jerked back instinctively, her mind racing through impossible options. If she resisted, she'd look guilty. If she complied, Victor won. If she tried to explain, no one would believe her. The fake footage had poisoned everything. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice cut through the chaos. "That video is fabricated." Every head turned. Lucien Moretti stood in the center of the ballroom, flanked by 2 people Serena didn't recognize. He wore a black suit that made him look like death incarnate, and his expression was carved from stone. The police officers' hands moved to their weapons. "Don't," Lucien said quietly, but the command in his voice made them pause. "I'm unarmed, and I have evidence that will prove Victor Vale doctored that footage." Victor's smile never wavered. "Of course you do. More fabricated evidence from a known criminal." "Not fabricated." One of the people beside Lucien, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, stepped forward holding a tablet. "I'm Dr. Sarah Kim, forensic video analyst with the FBI, and I can prove that the footage shown here tonight was digitally manipulated using deepfake technology." She held up the tablet, showing frame-by-frame analysis of the video. Artifacts, inconsistencies, proof of digital alteration. "This footage," Dr. Kim continued, "was created using approximately 40 hours of source material gathered illegally through surveillance of Lucien Moretti's property. The audio was synthesized using AI voice cloning, and the entire production was commissioned by—" Victor moved faster than Serena had ever seen him move. He grabbed her arm, yanking her against him, and something cold and sharp pressed against her throat. A knife. Small. The kind he used to open mail in his study. The ballroom erupted into screams and chaos. Police officers drew weapons, shouting commands that blended into white noise. But all Serena could focus on was the blade against her skin and Victor's breath hot against her ear. "You stupid, stupid girl," he hissed. "Did you really think you could beat me?" The knife pressed harder, not enough to cut, just enough to promise. "Drop the weapons," Victor shouted at the police. "Drop them or I'll cut her throat right here." The officers hesitated, glancing at each other, uncertain how to proceed. Lucien hadn't moved. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on Serena's, and she could see the calculations running behind them. Distance, angles, risk assessment. "Let her go," Lucien said, his voice deadly calm. "Why would I do that?" Victor laughed, the sound unhinged. "She's the only leverage I have left." "You don't have anything left. The FBI has your real financial records, the insurance policy, documentation of 25 years of abuse." Lucien took a single step forward. "It's over, Victor." "It's not over until I say it's over." Victor's hand shook, and the knife nicked Serena's skin. She felt blood trickle down her neck, warm and wet. The audience had backed away, creating a circle of empty space around the stage. Phones were out, recording everything, but no one dared get closer. Serena's mind raced through fragmented thoughts. The panic button under her dress. Too risky. If she moved, Victor might slash her throat. The police. Frozen, unwilling to risk a hostage situation going wrong on live camera. Lucien. Still watching her with those dark, steady eyes. And then she remembered something he'd said weeks ago, standing in his kitchen while teaching her about the men he hunted. Predators rely on fear. Take away the fear, and they have nothing. Serena stopped struggling, let her body go limp in Victor's grip, and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do it!" Victor froze. What? Kill me. Serena's voice didn't shake. Right here, in front of 500 witnesses and 20 cameras. Prove to everyone what you really are. Shut up. You wanted me dead anyway. The insurance policy, the car accident in the Everglades. She felt him flinch behind her. At least this way everyone will know the truth. I said shut up! But Serena kept talking, her voice growing stronger. My name is Serena Vale. I'm 25 years old, and my father has been beating me since I was 7. The words poured out like poison being drained from a wound. He broke my ribs when I was 9, fractured my wrist when I was 13, gave me a concussion when I was 17. And every single time he told the hospital it was an accident. The knife trembled against her throat. He killed my mother 12 years ago, pushed her down the stairs during an argument and told everyone she'd slipped. Serena's eyes found the cameras, the red recording lights. And 3 weeks ago, he sold me to pay off his gambling debts, then took out a $3 million life insurance policy and planned to stage my death as a car accident. She's lying, Victor shouted, but his voice had lost its power. He sounded desperate now, cornered. I have scars, Serena said, medical records, documented injuries going back 18 years. And if I die here tonight, at least everyone will finally see you for what you are. She locked eyes with Lucien across the ballroom. A coward, who only feels powerful when he's hurting people weaker than him. Victor screamed, an incoherent sound of pure rage, and the knife moved, but Serena had been waiting for it. She drove her elbow backward into his ribs, the same ribs he'd broken when she was 9, the same spot that never quite healed right. Victor's grip loosened for just a fraction of a second. It was enough. Serena twisted, dropping to the floor as Lucien moved like lightning across the ballroom. He hit Victor with the force of a freight train, driving him backward into the podium. The crystal trophy shattered, the microphone shrieked feedback, and Victor's knife clattered across marble tile, spinning away into uselessness. Police officers swarmed the stage instantly, dragging Victor away from Lucien before he could do any more damage. But Lucien had already stopped, his hands raised, showing he wasn't a threat. Victor fought against the officers holding him, his face twisted into something inhuman. She's lying. All of it is lies. I'm the victim here. I'm the one being persecuted. But nobody was listening anymore, because while he screamed, Dr. Kim had uploaded her analysis to every screen in the ballroom. Proof that Victor's footage was fake. Proof that he'd hired a tech company to fabricate evidence. Proof that every word Serena had just said was true. And finally, the real footage. Security camera recordings from the night Victor had brought Serena to Lucien's estate. Unedited, unmanipulated, showing Victor shoving his bruised, terrified daughter through iron doors like she was garbage. Showing him abandoning her without a backward glance. Showing Lucien asking the one question that had started everything. Who hurt you? The ballroom had gone silent except for Victor's shouting and the click of handcuffs snapping closed around his wrists. Margaret Chen stood frozen at the edge of the stage, the Beacon of Hope award lying shattered at her feet. Serena sat on the floor where she'd fallen, blood still trickling down her neck, her entire body shaking with adrenaline. Lucien crouched beside her, his hands hovering near her shoulders but not touching. Are you hurt? She looked up at him, at the man who'd seen her bruises and asked questions, who'd built an empire hunting predators, who'd risked everything to give her a chance at justice. No, she whispered. I'm okay. But she wasn't okay. Because as police hauled Victor toward the doors, he looked back at her one final time and smiled. Not the practiced smile he wore for cameras. Not the false warmth he showed donors and politicians. The real smile. The one Serena had seen in moments before violence, before pain, before the world went dark and she learned that silence was safer than hope. You think this is over? Victor called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. You have no idea what's coming. Then he was gone, dragged through the ballroom doors into a sea of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Serena sat in the wreckage of his empire and tried to understand why his words felt less like a threat and more like a promise. The hospital was quiet at 3 a.m. Serena sat on an examination table in the ER, a butterfly bandage covering the cut on her neck, while a doctor checked her vitals and asked questions she barely heard. Yes, she was okay. No, she didn't need anything for pain. Yes, she understood she'd need to give a statement to the police. The doctor finally left, and Serena was alone with the fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic and the memory of Victor's smile. Lucien stood in the doorway, looking like he hadn't moved since they'd arrived. His suit was rumpled, his knuckles bruised from hitting Victor, his expression unreadable. "He's in custody," Lucien said. "Federal charges. Attempted murder, insurance fraud, money laundering, assault. He's not getting bail." Serena nodded, but didn't respond. Dr. Kim turned over all her evidence to the FBI, the video footage, the forensic analysis, everything. Lucien stepped into the room. Victor hired a company called Deep Frame Solutions to create the fake videos. They've been doing it for months, not just you, other people too. Politicians, activists, anyone who threatened him. Okay. Serena, he said it wasn't over. She finally looked up at him. What did he mean? Lucien was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and held it out to her. On the screen was a news article, published 20 minutes ago. Victor Vale arrested amid shocking allegations. Daughter claims years of abuse, but questions remain about mafia connection. Serena's stomach twisted as she read further. The article detailed the arrest, the evidence, the dramatic confrontation at the ballroom. But it also raised questions about Lucien, about his criminal empire, about whether Serena had simply traded one dangerous man for another. "They're going to investigate me," Lucien said quietly. "My business, my connections, everything. Will they find anything? They'll find exactly what I let them find, which is enough to make me look suspicious, but not enough to prosecute." He took the phone back. "But that's not the problem." "What is?" "Victor's lawyers filed a motion this morning, claiming he was entrapped, that you and I conspired to destroy him using fabricated evidence." Serena's blood went cold. "But Dr. Kim proved his videos were fake. And his lawyers are arguing that we created fake videos to counter his real videos, that the FBI analyst is on my payroll." Lucien's jaw tightened. "It's not going to work. The evidence is too strong. But it will drag this out for months, maybe years." "So he wins anyway." "No, he doesn't win. He's going to prison." Lucien crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. "But he's going to make it as painful as possible. Drag your name through the media. Force you to testify over and over. Make you relive every moment of abuse in front of juries and reporters." Serena's throat closed. "You need to decide," Lucien said softly, "if you're strong enough for that. Because if you're not, if this is too much, I can make it go away." "How?" His expression went flat, empty. "Victor can have an accident in holding. Prison justice. Happens all the time." The offer hung in the air like smoke. One word from her, and Victor would die before ever seeing a courtroom. No trial, no testimony, no years of fighting, just silence. Serena thought about her mother, about Sophia, about every woman who'd been silenced by men like Victor. She thought about the pendant around her neck and the scar on her throat and the 25 years she'd spent learning to disappear. Then she thought about standing on that stage, blood running down her neck, and speaking her truth in front of 500 people who'd spent their lives pretending monsters didn't exist. "No," she said. Lucien's expression didn't change. "You're sure? I want him to face trial. I want everyone to hear what he did. I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing that I'm the reason he lost everything." "It's going to destroy you." "Maybe." Serena met his eyes. "But I'd rather be destroyed fighting than safe and silent." Something shifted in Lucien's face. Not quite a smile. Not quite pride. Something raw. "Okay," he said. "Then we fight, Omak." They left the hospital as dawn broke over Miami, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that made the city look almost beautiful. Lucien drove Serena back to his estate in silence, both of them too exhausted for conversation. But as they pulled through the iron gates, Serena noticed something that made her stomach drop. News vans, dozens of them, parked along the street outside the property, cameras pointed at the entrance. "They've been there since midnight," Lucien said, his voice tight. "Waiting for you." "What do they want?" "Your story, an interview, anything they can sell." He pulled into the garage, the door closing behind them and blocking out the cameras. "You don't have to talk to them." "What if I want to?" He looked at her sharply. Why would you want that? Because Victor's lawyers are going to spend the next 6 months telling everyone I'm a liar, a manipulator, a sick girl being controlled by a criminal. Serena unbuckled her seatbelt. What if I don't let them control the narrative? The media will eat you alive. They're already eating me alive. She opened the car door. At least this way I get to tell them the truth first. Lucien caught her wrist. Serena, I'm not Sophia. The words hit him like a physical blow. I'm not going to wait for someone to save me, Serena continued, and I'm not going to let Victor turn me into a victim one more time. So either you help me or I do this alone. Lucien stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he released her wrist. There's a reporter named Claire Morrison, investigative journalist. She's been trying to expose wealthy predators for years, but no one will touch her stories. He pulled out his phone. If you're going to talk to anyone, talk to her. Will she believe me? She'll investigate. And if the evidence supports you, she'll burn down anyone who tries to silence you. Serena nodded. Set up the interview. Her son, Claire Morrison, arrived 3 hours later. She was younger than Serena expected. Mid-30s, with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers that suggested someone who still took handwritten notes. She set up a recorder on the coffee table in Lucien's sitting room and looked at Serena with an expression that was neither sympathetic nor skeptical. Professional. I'm going to ask you difficult questions, Claire said. Not because I don't believe you, but because if I don't ask them, someone else will. And I'd rather you have the chance to answer on your own terms. Okay. When did the abuse start? Serena told her everything, every beating, every hospital visit, every lie Victor had forced her to tell. She told her about her mother's death, about the insurance policy, about being sold to pay off gambling debts. She told her about Lucien asking, "Who hurt you?" And the moment she realized monsters came in respectable packaging, Claire's pen moved across paper, steady and sure, never interrupting. When Serena finished, Claire looked up. And you understand that Victor's defense team is going to claim you and Lucien conspired to frame him? Yes. They're going to say you're mentally ill, traumatized to the point of delusion. I know. They're going to tear apart your entire life, every relationship, every decision, every moment of weakness. Claire's eyes were hard but not unkind. Are you prepared for that? Serena thought about the knife at her throat, about Victor's smile, about 25 years of silence. No, she said honestly. But I'm doing it anyway. Claire smiled for the first time, small and sharp. Good. Because if you'd said yes, I'd know you were lying. She stood, gathering her equipment. I'll have the story ready in 48 hours. It'll run on the front page of the Herald, and I'll make sure every major outlet picks it up. And then? And then the real fight begins. Chut. The article published 2 days later with a headline that made Serena's hands shake. I survived my father, the Serena Vale story. Claire had written it exactly as Serena had told it. No embellishment, no dramatization, just the brutal, unflinching truth about a father who'd spent 25 years destroying his daughter. Within hours, it had been shared 50,000 times. Within a day, cable news was covering it non-stop. Within a week, 3 more women had come forward with stories about Victor. Business associates he'd assaulted, employees he'd harassed, a pattern of violence hidden behind philanthropic donations and political connections. The case that had seemed impossible suddenly became unwinnable for Victor's defense team. But Victor himself remained silent, locked in federal detention, refusing all interview requests, until the 10th day. That's when Lucien's phone rang at midnight with a number he didn't recognize. He answered it, putting it on speaker so Serena could hear. Victor's voice came through, calm and measured. Did you think I wouldn't have contingencies? Lucien's expression went flat. What do you want, Victor? I want you to listen very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will determine whether your little girlfriend lives or dies. Serena's blood turned to ice. 3 years ago, Victor continued, I took out a life insurance policy on Serena. You found that policy and used it as evidence of my intent to harm her. We know, Lucien said. What you don't know is that I took out a second policy. Same beneficiary, same death benefit. But this one has a very specific clause. Victor's voice was almost cheerful now. If Serena dies while I'm incarcerated, the payout doubles. $6 million. Enough to pay off every debt I have and set up a very comfortable life after I'm released. You're not getting released. Maybe not, but my associates don't care about that. Victor let the words sink in. They care about $6 million, and they have very specific instructions about how to collect it. Lucien's hand tightened on the phone. If you touch her, I'm not going to touch her. I'm in prison, remember? Victor laughed. But accidents happen. Gas leaks, car crashes, home invasions. The world is such a dangerous place. The line went dead. Serena sat frozen, her mind racing through the implications. Victor had just put a $6 million bounty on her head, and he'd done it from behind bars where he was untouchable. Lucien was already moving, his phone pressed to his ear, issuing commands in a voice carved from ice. James, full lockdown, now. I don't care what it costs. Yes, everyone. No one gets in or out without my authorization. He ended the call and looked at Serena, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something that terrified her more than Victor's knife. She saw fear. We need to move you, Lucien said. Tonight. Somewhere Victor's people can't find you. Where? I don't know yet, but... The lights went out. All of them. Simultaneously. The house plunged into darkness so complete Serena couldn't see her own hands. Then, from somewhere in the black, came the sound of breaking glass. And footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving through the house with practiced efficiency. Lucien's hand found hers in the dark, pulling her toward what she thought was the hallway. Stay behind me, he whispered. Don't make a sound. But before they could move, a voice cut through the darkness. Lucien Moretti, step away from the girl. Flashlight beams stabbed through the black, blinding and disorienting. 6 figures emerged from the shadows, all wearing tactical gear, all carrying weapons. Not police. Something else. The lead figure lowered his flashlight, and Serena's world tilted completely off its axis. Because she recognized the face. Marcus. Lucien's lawyer. The man who'd been helping them build the case against Victor. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. But $6 million is $6 million. Lucien moved instantly, putting himself between Serena and the weapons. His hands raised, but his body coiled. You work for me, he said, his voice deadly calm. I worked for you, Marcus corrected. Past tense. Victor made me a better offer. How long? 3 months. Since he first came to you about settling his debt. Marcus smiled without warmth. He knew you'd dig into his background, knew you'd find the insurance policy, knew you'd try to help his daughter. So this was all planned. Every bit of it. The fake videos were real. We really did hire Deepframe, but only to make you think you'd won, to make Serena feel safe. Marcus gestured to the men flanking him. And now we collect. Serena's mind reeled. Every conversation she'd had in this house, every plan they'd made, every moment she'd felt safe. Marcus had been there for all of it, feeding information back to Victor, setting the trap, waiting for this exact moment. You can't kill her here, Lucien said. Too many witnesses, too much surveillance. You're right, which is why we're taking her somewhere quieter. Marcus nodded to his men. Grab her. 2 of them moved forward. Lucien didn't hesitate. He moved like violence incarnate, striking the first man in the throat with enough force to crush his windpipe. The second man swung a rifle, but Lucien caught it mid-swing and drove the butt into his face. Then all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Muzzle flashes strobed through the darkness like lightning. Lucien shoved Serena behind a couch as bullets chewed through expensive furniture and shattered windows. Run! He shouted over the chaos. Back door! Now! Serena didn't think. She just moved. Her feet carried her through the dark house by pure muscle memory, hands trailing walls, lungs burning. Behind her, the gunfire continued, shouting, sounds of impact. She found the back door and fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the deadbolt. It finally clicked open, and she burst out into the humid Miami night. The estate grounds stretched before her, manicured lawn giving way to dense tropical vegetation at the property's edge. She ran for the trees, made it maybe 50 feet before a hand closed around her arm and yanked her backward. She screamed, thrashing, but the grip was iron. A flashlight beam hit her face, blinding. "Gotcha," a voice said. Not Marcus. One of his men. He started dragging her back toward the house, and Serena's survival instincts kicked in with desperate clarity. She remembered every self-defense lesson Elena had insisted she take, every technique Lucien had shown her. Serena drove her heel into the man's instep, then slammed her elbow into his solar plexus when he reflexively loosened his grip. He grunted, staggering, and she broke free. Ran again. This time toward the front gate, where news vans were still parked. If she could reach the cameras, reach witnesses, they couldn't kill her without exposing everything. Her legs pumped, her lungs screamed. The pendant around her neck bounced against her chest, and she realized with crystal clarity that she'd never pressed the panic button. Too late now. She was 10 feet from the gate when headlights flooded the driveway. A black SUV screeched to a stop directly in her path, blocking her escape. The door opened, and Marcus stepped out. Behind him, more vehicles arrived. Men poured out, surrounding her. Serena spun, looking for an exit, but there was nowhere left to run. The iron gates were locked. The walls were 12 feet high. The news vans were too far away to hear her scream over the sound of engines and shouted orders. She was trapped. Marcus approached slowly, his weapon lowered but ready. "This doesn't have to hurt. We can make it quick." "Lucien will kill you," Serena said, her voice shaking. "Maybe, if he survives the next 5 minutes." Marcus glanced back toward the house, where more gunfire echoed. "But that's not your problem anymore." He raised his weapon. Serena closed her eyes, and then the world exploded. Not gunfire, something bigger, louder. The explosion rocked the entire estate, a fireball erupting from somewhere near the house and painting the night sky orange. Everyone froze, including Marcus. In that moment of distraction, Serena saw her chance. She ran. Not toward the gate, not toward the house, toward the bay. The estate backed up to the water, and if she could reach it, if she could get into the ocean, her feet hit grass, then sand, then water. The bay was cold and black and endless. Serena dove in and started swimming, her dress dragging like an anchor, her muscles screaming. Behind her, she heard shouting. Flashlight beams swept across the water. But she kept swimming, stroke after desperate stroke, putting distance between herself and the men who wanted her dead. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan. She just knew that stopping meant dying. So she swam until her arms wouldn't move anymore, until her legs went numb, until the lights of the estate faded into pinpricks behind her. And then, finally, she let herself sink beneath the surface. Just for a moment, just long enough to understand that she was alone in the dark water with no way back and no way forward. Victor had won after all. Not by killing her, by making her kill herself trying to survive. Serena's lungs burned, her body begged her to breathe. And in that moment, suspended in black water between life and death, she had to make a choice. Give up and let the ocean take her. Or fight one more time, even though every logical part of her brain said it was hopeless. Her mother's voice echoed through her memory. Not words, just presence. The feeling of being loved before everything went wrong. Serena kicked toward the surface, broke through gasping and sputtering, and kept swimming. Serena's arms screamed with every stroke, her waterlogged dress dragging her down like chains. The bay stretched endlessly in every direction, black water merging with black sky until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Behind her, the Moretti estate burned. Orange flames clawed at the night, throwing shadows across the water that looked like reaching hands. She didn't know if Lucien was alive, didn't know if Marcus and his men were already in boats, hunting her across the bay. She just knew that if she stopped swimming, she'd drown. Her muscles seized, her lungs felt like they'd been scraped raw. Salt water burned her throat every time a wave hit her face wrong, but she kept moving. One stroke, then another, until her hand hit something solid, wood, rough and barnacle encrusted. Serena grabbed it with both hands, gasping, and realized she'd reached a dock. Private. Probably belonging to one of the mansions lining the bay. She hauled herself up with the last dregs of her strength, collapsing face first onto weathered planks that smelled like fish and diesel fuel. For a long moment, she just lay there, her body shaking so violently her teeth chattered. Then she forced herself up onto her hands and knees and assessed the damage. The pendant was gone, lost somewhere in the bay. Her phone, the emergency one, was destroyed by salt water. The butterfly bandage had peeled off, and blood from the knife wound was mixing with bay water, running down her neck in pink streams. She was alone, unarmed, wearing a dress that clung to her like a second skin and marked her as clearly as a target painted on her back. And Victor's men were still out there. Serena looked up in the mansion connected to the dock. Dark windows. No lights. Either empty or the owners were asleep. She didn't have time to be polite. She staggered up the dock toward the house, her bare feet leaving wet prints on expensive teak. The back door was locked, but a potted plant beside it was hiding exactly what every rich person in Miami kept hidden: a spare key. Serena let herself in. The house was empty, silent except for the hum of air conditioning and her own ragged breathing. She moved through it quickly, searching for anything useful: kitchen, living room, study. In the study, she found a laptop sitting open on a mahogany desk. Serena sat down, her wet dress soaking into a leather chair that probably cost more than most cars, and opened the web browser with shaking hands. News sites loaded immediately. Breaking: explosion at Moretti Estate. Multiple casualties reported in Miami Shore. Incident: Serena Vale. Missing after violent confrontation. She clicked through articles with mounting dread. The explosion had been visible from downtown Miami. Fire departments were on scene. Police had cordoned off the entire block. But nowhere, in any article, any update, any breaking news alert, was there mention of Lucien, dead or alive, captured or escaped. Just nothing. Serena's hands curled into fists, nails digging into her palms until she felt pain cut through the numbness. She opened a new browser tab and searched for Claire Morrison's contact information. Found her work email. Started typing. Claire. Victor had a second insurance policy. $6 million if I die while he's incarcerated. His lawyer Marcus was working for him the whole time. They attacked Lucien's estate tonight. I don't know if Lucien survived. I don't know how long I have. If I die, make sure everyone knows it was Victor. Don't let him win. Serena. She hit send and closed the laptop. Then she searched the house for anything that could be used as a weapon. The master bedroom yielded a hunting knife in a bedside drawer. The garage gave her car keys to a Mercedes and a baseball bat. Serena took both the knife and the bat, leaving the keys. Stealing a car would trigger an alert the second she turned the ignition. Better to stay on foot, stay invisible. She found dry clothes in a walk-in closet. Designer yoga pants and a black hoodie that were 3 sizes too big, but at least didn't scream drowning victim. She changed quickly, shoving the wet dress into a hamper and pulling her hair back into a tight ponytail. When she caught her reflection in a full-length mirror, she barely recognized herself. Bruised, bleeding, eyes too wide and too hard at the same time. She looked like someone who'd been hunted, someone who'd learned to hunt back. Serena left the house the same way she'd entered, locking the door behind her and replacing the key under the plant. The streets of Miami Shore were quiet at 4 a.m. Mansion after mansion sat dark and peaceful, their wealthy occupants sleeping behind security systems and private gates. None of them knew a war was happening in their neighborhood. Serena moved through shadows, keeping to tree lines and hedgerows, the bat gripped tight in both hands. She needed to get somewhere public, somewhere with cameras and witnesses, somewhere Marcus and his men couldn't make her disappear without consequences. The problem was that somewhere public was at least 2 miles away on foot, and she had no idea if she'd make it that far before they found her. Boys. She made it 6 blocks before the first car appeared. Black SUV. Same model that had cut her off at the estate. Its headlights swept the street ahead, moving slowly, searchlights scanning yards and driveways. Serena dove behind a hedge, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The SUV crept past, close enough that she could hear voices through the open windows. Has to be somewhere nearby. She can't have gotten far. Shit, what? Damn. Marcus wants her alive if possible. Worth more that way. Yeah, but if she fights... The voices faded as the vehicle turned a corner and disappeared. Serena waited 30 seconds, then a minute. Then she ran, cut through a backyard, vaulted a fence that tore skin from her palms, landed hard on the other side and kept moving. More headlights appeared ahead. She changed direction, ducking down a side street that dead-ended at a construction site, The building was half finished, just steel beams and concrete floors, surrounded by equipment and materials covered in tarps. Serena slipped through a gap in the chain-link fence and disappeared into the skeletal structure. She climbed to the third floor, her legs shaking, and crouched behind a stack of drywall where she could see the street below. 2 more SUVs arrived within minutes. Men got out, 6 of them, all armed, all moving with military precision. They spread out, checking nearby yards, scanning with flashlights. One of them spoke into a radio. "Grid search pattern. She's on foot. Can't have gone more than a mile." Another voice crackled back. "Marcus wants hourly updates. Vale's getting impatient. Tell Vale he can wait. We're not rushing this." They moved methodically through the neighborhood, street by street, house by house. Professional, patient, absolutely certain they'd find her eventually. Serena's hand found the knife in her pocket, 10 inches of steel that felt inadequate against 6 men with guns. But it was something. She waited until they'd moved 2 blocks away, then climbed down from her hiding spot and headed in the opposite direction. East, toward downtown, toward crowds and daylight and the possibility of survival. Dawn broke ugly and gray over Miami. Serena had covered maybe 3 miles, moving in fits and starts, hiding whenever vehicles approached, her body running on nothing but adrenaline and stubborn refusal to die. She'd reached the edge of Wynwood, the arts district, where warehouses had been converted into galleries and coffee shops, and the kind of places that opened early for joggers and students. People were starting to emerge. Not many, but enough that Serena didn't feel completely exposed. She ducked into a coffee shop just as it opened, the warmth and smell of espresso hitting her like a physical thing. The barista, a kid with purple hair and too many piercings, looked up from wiping down the counter and froze. "Jesus, are you okay?" Serena caught her reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Blood had dried on her neck. Her borrowed clothes were torn and dirty. Her hands were scratched raw. She looked like exactly what she was, someone running for her life. "Can I use your phone?" Serena asked, her voice hoarse. "Yeah, sure." The kid handed over a cell phone, concern written across their face. "Do you need me to call someone? Police? Ambulance?" "No, no police." Serena took the phone with shaking hands. "Just give me 2 minutes." She stepped into the bathroom and locked the door. Her first instinct was to call Lucien, but she didn't know his number by heart. It had been stored in the phone now sitting at the bottom of Biscayne Bay. She tried Claire Morrison's cell, got voicemail. Tried the Miami Herald's main line. A receptionist answered, professionally cheerful, and Serena forced herself to speak slowly and clearly. "I need to speak with Claire Morrison. Tell her it's Serena Vale. Tell her it's an emergency." "I'm sorry, but Ms. Morrison doesn't arrive until..." "Tell her Victor Vale's men are trying to kill me right now. Tell her if she wants the story, she needs to answer her fucking phone." Serena hung up. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Then it rang. "Unknown number." She answered. "Claire?" "No." Marcus's voice, calm, almost friendly. Ice flooded Serena's veins. "How did you... You used a phone registered to a business with a public address. We have people monitoring emergency services, news outlets, hospitals." Marcus sounded almost apologetic. "It's over, Serena. You ran well, fought hard, but we're 3 blocks away and closing fast." Through the bathroom window, Serena saw the black SUVs pulling up outside. "You have 2 choices," Marcus continued. "Come out peacefully, and I'll make it quick. Or make us drag you out, and I'll let my men have some fun first." Serena looked at the knife in her other hand, at the window that was too small to climb through, at the locked door between her and 6 armed men. "There's a third option," she said quietly. "What's that?" "You can go fuck yourself." She hung up and threw the phone against the wall, shattering it. Then she grabbed the bat she'd left leaning against the sink and opened the door. The coffee shop had emptied. Smart kid had probably seen the SUVs and run. Marcus stood in the center of the space, flanked by 3 of his men, all of them armed, all of them watching her with the patient interest of predators who knew the prey had nowhere left to run. "You really want to do this?" Marcus asked. "Not particularly." Serena's grip tightened on the bat. "But I'm not dying in a bathroom." "Fair enough." He nodded to his men. They moved forward in formation, fanning out to cut off any escape route. Serena didn't wait for them to reach her. She swung the bat with everything she had, targeting the lead man's knee. Connected hard enough that she felt bones crack. He went down screaming. The second man lunged. Serena ducked under his reach and drove the knife into his thigh. Not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to hurt. He stumbled back, clutching the wound. Then someone grabbed her from behind, arms locking around her chest, lifting her off the ground. She threw her head backward, felt it connect with the nose. Heard cursing. The grip loosened fractionally. Serena twisted, got one arm free, and raked her nails across her attacker's eyes. He dropped her. She hit the ground rolling, came up in a crouch, bat raised. But Marcus had his gun out now, pointed directly at her head. Enough! His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Everyone froze. Serena stayed crouched, breathing hard, blood and sweat dripping into her eyes. I gave you a chance to make this easy, Marcus said. Now we do it the hard way. He pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But Serena didn't feel pain, didn't feel anything, because the bullet hadn't hit her. Marcus was staring down at his chest, where a red bloom was spreading across his white shirt. He looked up, confusion crossing his face. Then he fell. Behind him stood Elena, holding a gun that looked too big for her small frame. Her expression was ice cold and absolutely steady. "Stupid men," she said quietly, always forgetting about the help. The remaining men spun toward her, raising their weapons. But Elena was already moving, firing twice more with the precision of someone who'd done this before. 2 more bodies hit the floor. The last man standing threw down his weapon and ran. Elena let him go. Then she looked at Serena. "Can you walk?" Serena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. We have maybe 5 minutes before more arrive." Elena grabbed Serena's arm, hauling her to her feet. "There's a car 2 blocks away. Move." They ran. Serena's legs felt like they belonged to someone else, her body running on pure adrenaline and Elena's iron grip on her wrist. The car was a nondescript Honda with tinted windows. Elena shoved Serena into the passenger seat and peeled out before the door was fully closed. "Where's Lucien?" Serena gasped out. "Alive. Barely." Elena took a corner hard enough that the tires screamed. The explosion was him. Rigged the security system to blow if anyone tried to breach the main house. Took out 3 of Marcus's men. "Is he—" "He's stable. James got him out through the tunnels." Elena glanced at her. "He's been losing his mind trying to find you." "The tunnels. Under the estate. Escape routes built into the foundation. Lucien doesn't trust anyone enough not to plan for betrayal." Elena's expression was grim. Turns out he was right. They drove in silence for several blocks, Elena taking a winding route through neighborhoods Serena didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" Serena finally asked. "Somewhere Victor doesn't know about. Somewhere his people can't reach." Elena's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "And then we're ending this." "How?" Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut. "By giving Victor exactly what he wants," she said. The safe house was an apartment above a laundromat in Little Haiti. Small, dingy, the kind of place no one looked twice at. Lucien was sitting on a stained couch when they arrived, his left arm in a sling, his face pale with blood loss, but his eyes clear and focused. He stood the second Serena walked through the door. "You're alive." It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact that seemed to carry all the weight in the world. Serena crossed the room and collapsed against him, her legs finally giving out. Lucien caught her with his good arm, holding her up, his breath warm against her hair. "I thought you were dead," she whispered. "Same." They stayed like that for a long moment, 2 people who'd survived the impossible, clinging to each other like drowning victims to driftwood. Then Lucien pulled back, his hand gentle on her jaw, tilting her face up to examine the knife wound on her neck. "He cut you. It's not deep. It's deep enough." His expression went dark. "Marcus?" "Dead. Elena shot him." Lucien's eyes flicked to Elena, who was leaning against the door, her gun still in her hand. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We've still got a problem." Elena set the gun on a table and pulled out her phone, showing them a news alert. "Victor Vale's daughter suspected in coordinated attack. Authorities seek Serena Vale for questioning in multiple homicides." Serena's vision blurred. "What?" "Victor's playing his final card. Lucien said quietly. Framing you for the deaths at my estate. Claiming you orchestrated the attack to eliminate witnesses against him. That's insane. That's strategy. Lucien's jaw tightened. If you're arrested for murder, your testimony against him becomes worthless. Even if the charges don't stick, the media will destroy you, make you look unstable, dangerous. So he wins. Not if we move first. James emerged from the apartment's only bedroom carrying a laptop. We've still got the original evidence, the real insurance policy, the documentation of abuse, which will be dismissed as fabricated by a murder suspect, Elena said flatly, unless we can prove Victor orchestrated everything. James set the laptop on the table and pulled up files. Marcus kept records, conversations, financial transactions, proof that he was working for Victor. On his encrypted server, Lucien said, which we can't access without his passwords. Actually, James smiled grimly. Marcus was an arrogant bastard. Used the same password for everything. I cracked it 20 minutes ago. He turned the laptop screen so everyone could see. Email chains stretching back 3 months. Detailed plans for framing Serena. Financial transfers from offshore accounts controlled by Victor. Instructions on how to stage her death. And, most damning of all, a recorded phone call from 2 days ago. Victor's voice, crystal clear. I want her dead before the trial. Make it look like suicide. Guilt over the attack. Everyone will believe it. The recording played for 30 seconds. Detailed, specific, absolutely incriminating. This is it, Serena breathed. This proves everything. It proves Victor hired Marcus to kill you, Lucien corrected, but it doesn't prove the original abuse, doesn't prove the insurance fraud. And Victor's lawyers will argue it's inadmissible because we obtained it illegally. So what do we do? Lucien looked at her for a long moment, then at Elena, then James. We go public, he said finally. Not through lawyers or courts or the legal system Victor controls. We bypass all of it. How? Serena asked. Live television, streaming to millions of people. We lay out every piece of evidence while Victor's still in custody and can't control the narrative. Lucien pulled up his own phone, scrolling through contacts. I know someone at Channel 7, investigative news program. They've been trying to interview you since the ceremony. If I go on television, the police will arrest me. Let them. Lucien met her eyes. You do the interview from the studio, lay out everything, show the evidence, tell your story. And when the police arrive to take you into custody, you go peacefully, on camera, in front of millions of witnesses. That's insane. That's the only play we have left. His expression was iron. Victor's betting you'll hide, run, prove his narrative that you're guilty. But if you walk into that studio and face him head on, he loses the story. He loses everything. Serena looked at the evidence on the laptop, at the recorded phone call that proved Victor had ordered her death, at the people in this room who'd risked everything to keep her alive. She thought about Sophia, who'd waited for someone to save her, about her mother, who died silent and alone, about 25 years of being too afraid to speak. Make the call, she said. Shock. Channel 7 agreed to the interview immediately. 8 p.m., live broadcast. No pre-screening of questions, no editorial control, just Serena, a veteran journalist named David Park, and the entire city of Miami watching. They had 6 hours to prepare. Elena dyed Serena's hair dark brown using supplies from a corner store. Changed her appearance enough that she might make it to the studio without being recognized on the street. James compiled the evidence into a presentation that could be shown on screen. Medical records, financial documents, the insurance policies, Marcus's emails, Victor's recorded phone call. Everything organized chronologically, clearly, irrefutably. Lucien made calls to every contact he had in media and law enforcement, ensuring the story would spread beyond just Channel 7's broadcast. And Serena sat in the bathroom, staring at her reflection, and practiced not falling apart. You don't have to do this, Lucien said from the doorway. She looked up at him. Yes, I do. If you go on that stage, there's no taking it back. Every detail of your life becomes public. Every wound gets reopened. I know. Serena stood, turning to face him fully. But if I don't, Victor wins, and I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't let him win. Not after everything. Lucien stepped into the bathroom, closing the door behind him. In the cramped space, they were inches apart. When this is over, he said quietly, you're going to need time, space, therapy probably, maybe years of it. I know. And I'm not... He stopped, struggling with words. I'm not the kind of man who does normal, quiet, safe. I know that too. Then why? Because you asked who hurt me. Serena reached up, her hand resting against his jaw. Because you didn't try to save me. You gave me the tools to save myself. Something shifted in his expression, raw, vulnerable. Sophia died because I tried to control the situation, he said, tried to protect her my way. I won't make that mistake with you. Good, Serena smiled, small and fierce. Because I don't need protection. I need backup. Lucien's hand covered hers, pressing it against his face. Then that's what you'll get. A knock on the door. James's voice. We need to leave in 10. Studio's expecting us at 7:30 for setup. Serena took a breath. Let it out slowly. Okay, she said. Let's finish this. The Channel 7 studio was a fortress of glass and steel in downtown Miami. Serena walked through the front doors at 7:45, flanked by Lucien and Elena, with James trailing behind carrying the laptop full of evidence. Security guards stared, recognized her immediately, reached for phones. She's here for the David Park interview, Lucien said before anyone could call the police. 8 p.m. live broadcast. Check with your producers. The head guard made a call, spoke quietly, then nodded. You're clear, 4th floor. They took the elevator up in silence. The studio was controlled chaos. Cameramen adjusting equipment, producers barking orders, makeup artists preparing the set. David Park met them in the green room, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much truth. Ms. Vale, he shook her hand. Thank you for trusting us with this. Thank you for having me. I need to be clear about something. David's expression turned serious. I'm going to ask you difficult questions about your father, about Lucien, about the violence. If you need to stop at any point, I won't need to stop. Serena, Lucien started. I won't, she repeated, looking at David. Ask whatever you need to ask. I'll answer honestly. David nodded slowly. Okay then, we go live in 8 minutes. A makeup artist appeared, touching up Serena's face, covering the worst of the bruises and the knife wound on her neck. Leave it, Serena said. The artist paused. I'm sorry? The cut on my neck. Don't cover it. Serena met her eyes in the mirror. People should see what he did. The artist stepped back, uncertain. David looked at his producer, who shrugged. It's her interview. 3 minutes to air. Serena walked onto the set. 2 chairs facing each other, a city skyline backdrop, lights bright enough to strip away any shadow. She sat down, adjusted the microphone clip to her collar, and waited. Lucien stood just off camera, his expression unreadable. Elena was somewhere in the building, stationed near an exit in case things went wrong. James had his laptop connected to the studio's systems, ready to display evidence on command. 1 minute. Serena's heart hammered. Her mouth was dry. Her hands shook slightly before she clenched them into fists. Across from her, David settled into his chair, notes in hand, his expression professional but not unsympathetic. 30 seconds. The studio went silent except for the countdown in Serena's earpiece. 5, 4, 3. The last 2 seconds were silent, just a hand signal. Then the red light on the camera blazed to life. Good evening. I'm David Park, and tonight we have an exclusive interview with Serena Vale, the young woman at the center of what may be Miami's most shocking scandal in decades. David's voice was steady, authoritative. Ms. Vale, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. Let's start with the most pressing question. Your father, Victor Vale, is currently in federal custody on multiple charges including attempted murder, insurance fraud, and conspiracy. He claims you fabricated these charges with the help of known criminal Lucien Moretti. How do you respond to that? Serena looked directly into the camera, into the eyes of everyone watching. My father has been beating me since I was 7 years old, she said. Her voice didn't shake. "And everything I'm about to tell you is the truth." Then she began. She told them about the first time Victor hit her, about her mother's death, about 25 years of learning that silence kept you alive. She told them about being sold to pay off gambling debts, about the insurance policy taken out days before she was handed over like property, about Lucien asking his one question that shattered everything. "Who hurt you?" David asked questions, tough ones, fair ones. "How do we know you're not being manipulated by Lucien Moretti?" "Because I'm sitting here making my own choices. If I were being controlled, I'd be silent, hidden, safe. Instead, I'm on live television telling you everything. Your father has evidence, video footage, showing you conspiring with Moretti. That footage was fabricated using deepfake technology. We have a forensic analysis from an FBI specialist proving it was digitally altered." "Can we see that analysis?" James pulled it up on screen. Dr. Kim's report, frame-by-frame breakdowns, proof of manipulation. The interview continued. 20 minutes, 30, 45. Every piece of evidence displayed for the audience, every question answered without hesitation, every wound exposed for the world to see. And through it all, Serena felt something shifting inside her. Not healing, not yet. But the weight she'd carried for 25 years was finally being shared, witnessed, believed. "One final question," David said as they approached the hour mark. "What do you want people watching this to understand?" Serena was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I want them to understand that monsters don't always look like criminals," she said finally. "Sometimes they look like philanthropists, community leaders, fathers, people we're taught to respect and trust." She looked directly into the camera again. "And I want survivors watching this to know that silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you isolated. Speaking up is terrifying, but staying silent is worse." David nodded. "Thank you for your courage." And the studio doors burst open. 6 police officers entered, weapons drawn, moving with practiced efficiency. "Serena Vale, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and assault with a deadly weapon." The cameras kept rolling. Serena stood slowly, her hands raised. "I understand. You have the right to remain. I know my rights." She looked at Lucien, standing just off camera, his expression carved from stone. Then back at the lead officer. "I'll come peacefully." They cuffed her in front of millions of people, read her rights while cameras recorded every word. And as they led her out of the studio, Serena passed David Park one more time. He was still sitting in his chair, watching her with an expression that might have been respect. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "The truth thanks you." Then she was being escorted through the building, down the elevator, out into the night where police cars waited with lights flashing. News crews had already gathered, reporters shouting questions. "Ms. Vale, are you guilty? Did you conspire to frame your father? Is it true you're involved with the Mafia?" Serena didn't answer, just let them lead her to the police car, her head up, her expression calm. As they put her in the back seat, she caught sight of Lucien standing at the building's entrance. He didn't wave, didn't call out, didn't make any gesture that could be captured on camera. He just stood there, solid and unmoving, watching her disappear into the legal system that had failed to protect her for 25 years. The police car pulled away, sirens wailing, and Serena leaned back against the seat, closed her eyes, and let herself feel something she hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Because for the first time in her life, the truth was out there. Witnessed by millions. Recorded. Documented. Impossible to erase. Victor could try to fight it. His lawyers could claim she was lying, but the world had seen her speak, had seen the evidence, had watched her walk into police custody without running or hiding or acting like someone with something to hide. And that, finally, was something even Victor Vale's money and reputation couldn't destroy. The holding cell was cold and gray and smelled like disinfectant. Serena sat on a metal bench and waited. Hours passed. Maybe 4. Maybe 6. Time felt meaningless in the windowless room. Then the door opened and a woman in a dark suit entered. "Ms. Vale, I'm Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chen. I need to ask you some questions." Serena looked up. "Am I being charged?" "That depends on your answers." Rebecca sat down across from her, placing a recorder on the bench between them. Let's start with Marcus Brennan. You admit to stabbing him? In self-defense. He was trying to kill me. Because? Because my father hired him. $6 million payout if I died while Victor was in custody. Rebecca's expression didn't change. You have proof of this? Recorded phone calls, financial transfers, all on a laptop that was handed over to Channel 7 during my interview. I see. Rebecca made a note. And the 3 men who died at the Moretti estate? Killed by Lucien Moretti in self-defense when they broke into his home to kidnap me. Serena met her eyes, which is also documented on security footage that survived the explosion. Rebecca was quiet for a moment, reviewing her notes. Ms. Vale, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is a nightmare. We have your father claiming you conspired to frame him. We have you claiming he's been abusing you for decades. We have fabricated evidence on both sides, and we have multiple deaths that may or may not be justified. What are you saying? I'm saying the DA is dropping the charges against you. Serena's breath caught. What? The evidence from your interview, combined with Dr. Kim's forensic analysis and the recordings from Marcus Brennan's server, makes it clear you were acting in self-defense. Rebecca stood. You're free to go. And my father? Is going to trial on the original charges, attempted murder, insurance fraud, conspiracy. And now we're adding solicitation of murder based on his phone calls with Marcus. Rebecca's expression was steel. He's going to prison, Ms. Vale, for a very long time. Serena felt something crack open inside her chest. Not quite hope, not quite relief. Justice. Real, tangible justice. There's someone waiting for you outside, Rebecca said, opening the cell door. I believe you know him. Serena walked out into the station's main area, and there, standing by the front desk like he'd been carved from stone, was Lucien. He looked exhausted. His arm was still in a sling. His face was pale with blood loss and lack of sleep. But when he saw her, something in his expression shifted, softened, became almost human. Serena crossed the room, and without thinking, without hesitation, she walked straight into his arms. Lucien held her with his good arm, his hand pressed against the back of her head, and for a long moment they just stood there in the middle of the police station while officers and lawyers and random strangers pretended not to stare. It's over, Lucien said quietly against her hair. Not yet, Serena whispered back. There's still a trial. But you're not alone for it. She pulled back just enough to see his face. Promise? I promise. And for the first time in her life, Serena believed him. Because some promises were built on violence and blood and the kind of shared trauma that welded people together in ways that couldn't be broken. This was one of them. Together, they walked out of the police station into the early morning light. The city was waking up. News vans were already gathering, reporters preparing for the next wave of coverage. But Serena didn't care about them. She cared about the fact that she was free, that Victor was in a cell, that the truth, finally, had been heard. Everything else could wait. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, she was winning, and that, finally, was enough. The trial of Victor Vale began 6 months after Serena walked out of that police station. 6 months of depositions and legal maneuvering and media circuses that turned her life into a spectacle. 6 months of watching Victor's lawyers try every trick in the book to discredit her, dismiss the evidence, paint her as an unstable woman manipulated by a criminal. 6 months of learning that justice wasn't a moment. It was a marathon through broken glass. Serena sat in the courtroom on the first day of proceedings, her hands folded in her lap, her expression carefully neutral. She'd learned not to react, not to give the cameras anything they could use against her. Across the room, Victor sat at the defense table in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. He looked older than she remembered, thinner. Gray had crept into his hair, and lines had carved themselves deeper around his eyes. But when he looked at her, those eyes were the same as they'd always been, cold, calculating, absolutely certain he'd find a way to win. The prosecution opened with Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Chen laying out the case in methodical detail. Insurance fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy. Decades of documented abuse. She presented medical records showing Serena's injuries from age 7 through 25. Hospital intake forms with Victor's signature claiming every injury was an accident. She presented the insurance policies, both of them. $3 million if Serena died naturally. $6 million if she died while he was incarcerated. She presented the recordings from Marcus Brennan's server, Victor's voice giving explicit orders to kill his daughter and make it look like suicide. And she called witnesses, doctors who'd treated Serena's injuries over the years, nurses who'd seen the bruises and been told not to ask questions, teachers who'd noticed her isolation and been reassured by Victor's charm that everything was fine. One by one, they testified to a pattern of violence that had been hiding in plain sight for 25 years. The defense's strategy was simple: attack Serena's credibility. Victor's lead attorney, a shark named Morrison with a reputation for destroying witnesses on cross-examination, stood before the jury and painted a picture of a troubled young woman with documented mental health issues who'd been groomed by a criminal to destroy her innocent father. He pointed to the fabricated videos Victor had created, claiming they proved a conspiracy. He pointed to Serena's relationship with Lucien, calling it Stockholm Syndrome, weaponized into extortion. He pointed to the deaths at the Moretti estate, suggesting Serena had orchestrated them to eliminate witnesses. Every word was poison wrapped in reasonable doubt. And through it all, Victor sat at his table looking like a grieving father wrongly accused. The performance was flawless. On day 3, Serena was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head up and her hands steady, even though her stomach was churning and her heart was hammering hard enough to crack ribs. She was sworn in, sat down, and looked out at the packed courtroom. Reporters, spectators, victims' advocates, people who'd followed her story, and people who thought she was lying. And Lucien, sitting in the back row, his dark eyes steady on hers. Rebecca Chen approached the stand. "Ms. Vale, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the jury in your own words what your father did to you." Serena took a breath, let it out slowly. Then she began. She told them about the first time Victor hit her. She'd been 7 years old and she'd spilled juice on his paperwork. He'd slapped her so hard she'd seen stars, then told her it was her fault for being careless. She told them about the broken ribs when she was 9, the fractured wrist when she was 13, the concussion when she was 17. She told them about her mother's death, about watching Victor shove her down the stairs during an argument and then call 911 sobbing about a terrible accident. She told them about being isolated from friends, from school, from anyone who might notice the bruises or ask questions. She told them about learning that silence kept you alive and hope got you hurt. And she told them about the night Victor sold her to pay off his gambling debts, then took out an insurance policy days later because she was worth more dead than alive. Morrison objected 17 times during her testimony. Hearsay, speculation, leading the witness. Each objection sustained felt like a small death. But Serena kept talking, kept answering Rebecca's questions with the kind of detail that couldn't be fabricated. The exact pattern of the carpet in Victor's study where he'd beaten her after her mother's funeral. The smell of the hospital where she'd been treated for a fractured wrist and told doctors she'd fallen off her bike. The sound of her father's breathing when he was angry, heavy and controlled, like a predator deciding when to strike. When Rebecca finally said no further questions, Serena felt like she'd run a marathon through fire. Then Morrison stood up for cross-examination. "Ms. Vale, you claim to have been abused for 18 years, yet you never reported this abuse to authorities. Why not?" "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Your father is a respected philanthropist. Surely someone would have believed you." "No one did believe me. The teachers who saw my bruises believed him when he said I was clumsy. The doctors believed him when he said I'd had accidents. The neighbors believed him when he said I was a troubled child." Serena's voice stayed level. "He was good at making people believe him." "Or perhaps," Morrison said smoothly, "there was nothing to believe. Perhaps these injuries were accidents, and you've rewritten history to fit a narrative that benefits you and Mr. Moretti. That's not true, isn't it? You stand to inherit your father's estate if he's convicted. Millions of dollars, a powerful motive for false accusations." "I don't want his money." "Really? Then why did you conspire with Lucien Moretti, a known criminal, to fabricate evidence against your father?" "I didn't fabricate anything. The evidence is real." Morrison pulled up the deepfake videos on a screen. "These videos show you planning to extort your father. Are you claiming they're fabricated?" "Yes, we presented forensic analysis provided by an expert Mr. Moretti, hired." How convenient. Morrison's smile was sharp. Ms. Vale, isn't it true that you were in a relationship with Lucien Moretti at the time these accusations were made? We weren't in a relationship. He was helping me, helping you destroy your father's reputation, helping you eliminate anyone who might contradict your story. Morrison's voice rose. 3 men died at the Moretti estate. Marcus Brennan was shot. Several others were injured. All of this happened while you were present. Are you really claiming you had nothing to do with that violence? Serena's hands clenched in her lap. They were trying to kill me. According to you. But everyone who might contradict that version is conveniently dead. Objection! Rebecca was on her feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained. Mr. Morrison, move on. But the damage was done. Morrison had planted seeds of doubt, and from the jury's faces, some of them had taken root. The cross-examination continued for another hour. Every answer Serena gave was twisted. Every piece of evidence questioned. Every motive examined and found suspicious. By the time the judge called for a recess, Serena felt like she'd been flayed alive. She stepped down from the witness stand on shaking legs, and as she passed Victor's table, he looked up, met her eyes, and smiled. That same smile from the ballroom, the one that said he knew something she didn't. Serena made it to the hallway outside the courtroom before her legs gave out. She sat down hard on a bench, her breath coming in short gasps, her vision tunneling. Then Lucien was there, crouching in front of her, his hands on her knees, grounding her. Breathe, he said quietly. In through your nose, out through your mouth. She followed his rhythm until the panic subsided enough for her to think clearly. I can't do this, she whispered. Yes, you can. They don't believe me. The jury, they think I'm lying. Some of them do, not all. Lucien's expression was carved from stone. And even if they don't believe you now, they will when we're done. How do you know? Because truth has weight, and lies, no matter how well told, eventually collapse under their own inconsistency. Rebecca Chen appeared at the end of the hallway, her expression grim. We need to talk. They moved to a private conference room. Serena, Lucien, Rebecca, and James, who'd been tracking media coverage throughout the trial. Rebecca closed the door and turned to face them. The defense is bringing in a surprise witness tomorrow, someone who claims to have information that contradicts Serena's testimony. Ice slid down Serena's spine. Who? They won't tell us. Judge approved it under seal. All we know is it's someone who was close to your family. Serena's mind raced through possibilities. Her father had systematically isolated her from everyone. There were no close family friends, no relatives who'd maintained contact. Unless, oh God, she breathed. Dr. Stevens. Who? Lucien asked. My therapist. Victor made me see him after my mother died. Said I needed help processing grief. Serena's hands were shaking again. But the sessions weren't about grief. They were about conditioning me, teaching me that everything wrong in my life was my fault, that my father loved me, and I was ungrateful. Did you tell Dr. Stevens about the abuse? Rebecca asked. Rebecca, I tried. Once, when I was 14, he told me I was having dissociative episodes, that I was creating false memories to cope with my mother's death. Serena looked up at them. And then he reported everything I said to my father. Victor beat me so badly I couldn't walk for 3 days. Lucien's expression went murderous. Can we block his testimony? Not without cause, Rebecca said. And therapist-patient privilege doesn't apply if the patient waives it, which Serena will have to do if she wants to contradict his testimony. So either I let him lie, or I open myself up to having everything I told him used against me, Serena said flatly. That's the situation. Silence settled over the room, heavy and suffocating. Then James spoke up from his laptop. There might be another option. Everyone turned to look at him. Dr. Stevens has a history, James said, scrolling through documents. Nothing that got him disbarred, but enough complaints to the medical board that there's a pattern. 3 former patients accused him of inappropriate relationships. 2 accused him of manipulating their testimony in custody cases. Can we use that? Lucien asked. In cross-examination, yes, but it'll be a fight. Rebecca leaned over James's shoulder, reading. If we attack his credibility too hard, the jury might think we're desperate. We are desperate, Serena said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Victor knew exactly what he was doing when he sent me to Dr. Stevens, she continued. He was building a paper trail, medical documentation showing I was mentally unstable, unreliable, a disturbed girl who couldn't be trusted. She stood pacing the small room. And now he's going to use that against me. Put Dr. Stevens on the stand and have him testify that I'm delusional, that I fabricated memories, that nothing I say can be believed. So we discredit him first, Lucien said. How? By making him admit that he violated every ethical standard in his profession. Lucien looked at Rebecca. You need to get those complaint files. Every allegation, every patient he manipulated. That's sealed information. I don't care. Get it. Rebecca and Lucien locked eyes for a long moment. Then Rebecca nodded. I'll see what I can do. Doug. Dr. Stevens took the stand the next morning looking exactly as Serena remembered. Expensive suit, kind eyes, the sort of gentle authority that made people trust him instinctively. Victor's attorney, Morrison, approached him with the reverence reserved for expert witnesses. Dr. Stevens, how long did you treat Serena Vale? Approximately 8 years, starting when she was 12 years old. And what was your diagnosis? Serena suffered from severe dissociative disorder, likely triggered by her mother's death. She had difficulty distinguishing between reality and fantasy, often creating elaborate false memories as a coping mechanism. Serena's nails dug into her palms hard enough to draw blood. Did she ever accuse her father of abuse during your sessions? Morrison asked. Yes, multiple times. But the accusations were inconsistent, changing in detail from session to session, classic signs of fabricated memories. And did you share your concerns with Mr. Vale? I did. As her legal guardian, he had a right to know about her mental health. Dr. Stevens' expression was sympathetic, concerned. Mr. Vale was devastated. He tried everything to help her, medication, alternative therapies, specialized care. Nothing seemed to work. In your professional opinion, is Serena Vale's testimony about abuse credible? No. I believe she genuinely thinks these events occurred, but her disorder makes it impossible for her to distinguish between actual memories and fantasies she's constructed to explain her own psychological pain. Morrison smiled. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. Rebecca Chen stood for cross-examination, and Serena could see the steel behind her professional demeanor. Dr. Stevens, you said Serena had difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy. Did you ever consider that maybe she was telling you the truth about the abuse? I considered it, but the evidence didn't support her claims. What evidence? Did you examine her for injuries? That wasn't within my scope of practice. Did you speak to her teachers, her doctors, anyone who might have corroborated her story? I spoke with her father, who assured me, You spoke with the man she was accusing. Rebecca's voice sharpened. The person she claimed was hurting her, and you took his word over hers? Mr. Vale was her legal guardian, a respected member of the community. So is reputation more important than a child's safety in your professional assessment? Objection, Morrison called, argumentative. Sustained. Rebecca switched tactics. Dr. Stevens, have you ever had complaints filed against you with the state medical board? Dr. Stevens' expression flickered, just for a second. I've had a few complaints over my career, nothing substantiated. Define a few. I don't recall the exact number. Let me refresh your memory. Rebecca pulled out a document. 7 formal complaints in the last 15 years. 3 alleging inappropriate relationships with patients. 2 alleging manipulation of testimony in family court cases. 1 alleging fraud. Those complaints were dismissed. Actually, 3 of them resulted in settlements, which means they were credible enough that you paid the plaintiffs to make them go away. Rebecca's expression was ice. Isn't that correct? Dr. Stevens' jaw tightened. I settled to avoid lengthy legal battles, not because I was guilty of anything. Of course. And the patient who accused you of manipulating her custody testimony, what was her name? I don't remember. Oh, Jennifer Harding. She claimed you coached her to say her husband was abusive when he wasn't, because the husband's attorney refused to hire you as an expert witness. Rebecca stepped closer. She later recanted her testimony, admitted you'd told her exactly what to say, lost custody of her children because of it. That's not... She attempted suicide 3 years later. Is that correct? Dr. Stevens' face had gone pale. I'm not responsible for... No further questions. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Morrison tried to rehabilitate his witness on redirect, but the damage was done. The jury had seen Dr. Stevens squirm, had heard about complaints and settlements, and a patient who'd tried to kill herself. When the judge finally dismissed Dr. Stevens from the stand, he looked like a man who'd aged 10 years and 20 minutes. But Victor's expression hadn't changed. He still looked calm, confident, like he had one more card to play. Quotes. The prosecution rested their case on day 7. Rebecca had presented every piece of evidence, called every witness, laid out the full scope of Victor's crimes in methodical, devastating detail. The defense called only 3 witnesses: Dr. Stevens, who'd been discredited, a character witness who testified that Victor was a pillar of the community, and Victor himself. On day 8, Victor Vale took the stand. He wore a gray suit that made him look humble, vulnerable. His hair was neatly combed, his expression sorrowful. Morrison led him through a gentle, direct examination. Mr. Vale, did you abuse your daughter? No, never. I loved her. Raised her as best I could after my wife died. Why do you think she's making these accusations? I think she's genuinely sick, traumatized by her mother's death and unable to process it in a healthy way. Victor's voice cracked perfectly. And I think Lucien Moretti saw an opportunity to exploit that trauma for his own gain. What gain? My estate. My reputation. Maybe just the satisfaction of destroying a man who's dedicated his life to helping others. Mr. Vale, did you take out life insurance policies on your daughter with the intent to harm her? Absolutely not. The policies were for her protection, to ensure she'd be cared for if something happened to me. And the $6 million payout if she died while you were incarcerated? I never agreed to that. My lawyer, Marcus Brennan, added that clause without my knowledge. When I found out, I was horrified. It was masterful. Victor answered every accusation with a plausible explanation, every piece of evidence with a reasonable doubt. By the time Morrison said no further questions, half the jury looked uncertain. Then Rebecca stood up for cross-examination. She approached the witness stand slowly, her expression unreadable. Mr. Vale, you claim to love your daughter, is that correct? With all my heart. Then why did you sell her to Lucien Moretti to pay off a gambling debt? Victor's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. I didn't sell her. I sent her to him as collateral temporarily while I secured funds. Collateral. You sent your daughter to a known criminal as collateral. Rebecca's voice could have cut glass. And you expected her back? Of course. Then why did you take out a life insurance policy 3 days before handing her over? I told you that was for her protection. A policy that paid you $3 million if she died. How does that protect her? It would have ensured her funeral expenses were covered. $3 million for funeral expenses? Rebecca's eyebrows rose. That's quite a funeral. Nervous laughter rippled through the courtroom. Victor's composure was cracking, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. Mr. Vale, let me ask you about your wife's death. You claim she fell down the stairs, is that correct? Yes. Were there any witnesses? Just Serena, but she was only 13, old enough to know what she saw. Rebecca pulled out a document. This is the police report from that night. It notes that there were no objects at the top of the stairs that might have caused your wife to trip. No loose carpeting, no obstacles. The investigating officer noted that the pattern of injuries was inconsistent with a simple fall. Accidents happen. And yet no charges were filed, no investigation pursued. Why do you think that is? Victor's eyes went cold. I have no idea. Could it be because you donated $50,000 to the police benevolent fund the week after your wife died? That was a coincidence. Was it also a coincidence that the detective assigned to investigate was transferred to a desk job a month later? I don't control police assignments, no, but you do have connections, influence, money. Rebecca leaned against the witness box. Enough to make inconvenient investigations disappear. Morrison objected. The judge sustained, but Rebecca wasn't done. Mr. Vale, do you recognize this recording? She played the audio from Marcus Brennan's server. Victor's voice filled the courtroom. I want her dead before the trial. Make it look like suicide. Get guilt over the attack. Everyone will believe it. That's taken out of context, Victor started. What context makes ordering your daughter's murder acceptable? I never said that. Whoa. It's your voice. Voice analysis confirms it. Multiple experts agree. Rebecca's expression was merciless. You ordered Marcus Brennan to kill Serena and stage it as suicide. And when that failed, you fabricated evidence to frame her for conspiracy. Isn't that correct? No. You've spent 25 years hurting your daughter, beating her, isolating her, gaslighting her into thinking she was the problem. Rebecca's voice rose, controlled fury in every word. And when she finally found the courage to speak up, you tried to have her killed. Then you tried to destroy her credibility. And now you're sitting here, in front of a jury, lying through your teeth. I am not... You are a monster, Mr. Vale. And the only reason you've gotten away with it for so long is because people like you are very good at looking respectable while you destroy everyone around you. Objection. Morrison was on his feet. This is a closing argument, not cross-examination. Sustained. Ms. Chen, do you have any actual questions for the witness? Rebecca turned back to Victor, who'd gone rigid with rage, his mask completely shattered. One question, she said. If you love your daughter so much, why haven't you looked at her once during this entire trial? Silence. Victor's eyes finally shifted to where Serena sat. And in that moment, everyone in the courtroom saw what she'd always known. There was no love there, no grief, no fatherly concern, just cold, calculating hatred. No further questions? Rebecca said. Closing arguments took 2 days. Morrison painted Victor as a victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by Lucien Moretti and carried out by a disturbed young woman with a history of mental illness. Rebecca painted Victor as exactly what he was, a predator who'd spent decades hiding behind philanthropy and reputation while destroying his daughter. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of waiting in the apartment Lucien had rented for Serena under a false name. 4 days of staring at her phone, watching news coverage, trying not to spiral into panic. On the 4th day, Elena came to the apartment at 2 in the afternoon. Jury's back, she said quietly. They have a verdict. Serena's hands started shaking. Lucien appeared from the bedroom, his expression carved from stone. Let's go. The courthouse was packed. Reporters everywhere. Spectators lining up for seats. The energy felt electric, dangerous. Serena took her seat in the front row with Lucien beside her and Rebecca at the prosecutor's table. Across the aisle, Victor sat with his lawyers, his expression unreadable. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Victor. Serena's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone in the courtroom could hear it. The judge looked in the jury foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find? Guilty. The word hung in the air like a bell tone. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder? Guilty. Insurance fraud? Guilty. Solicitation of murder? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouting into phones, spectators crying. Victor's lawyers immediately filing objections that the judge overruled with a sharp crack of his gavel. Serena sat frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Guilty. On every count. Victor was being led away in handcuffs, his face twisted in rage, shouting something that was drowned out by the chaos. Then Lucien's hand found hers, squeezing gently. You did it, he said quietly. It's over. Serena looked at him, at the man who'd asked, Who hurt you? And refused to let her disappear. It's over, she repeated. And finally, after 25 years of violence and 6 months of fighting, she believed it. Victor Vale was sentenced 3 weeks later to 40 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Serena didn't attend the sentencing. She'd said everything she needed to say during the trial, and she had no interest in watching Victor perform grief one more time. Instead, she stood in the empty shell of what had once been the Vale estate. Bulldozers waited outside. Construction crews ready to tear down the house that had been her prison for 25 years. She'd bought the property after Victor's assets were seized, paid fair market value, legally, properly, and now she was going to destroy it. Lucien stood beside her in the foyer where Victor had once beaten her for spilling juice on his paperwork. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "Completely." She nodded to the foreman, and the demolition began. The first swing of the wrecking ball hit the east wing, Victor's study, where he'd planned her murder. The second hit her childhood bedroom, where she'd learned that silence kept you alive. The third hit the staircase where her mother had died. Serena watched it all come down, piece by piece, until the house was nothing but rubble and dust. "What are you going to build here?" Lucien asked. Serena pulled out the architectural plan she'd been working on for months. "A shelter. For survivors of domestic violence, 24 beds, legal aid office, therapy rooms, medical clinic." She looked up at him. "Everything I needed and never had." "What are you calling it?" "Haven House." Lucien studied the plans, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at her. "You're going to run it?" "With Elena's help. And James is handling the legal structure, and—" She hesitated. "I was hoping you'd be willing to fund the security system, something that actually works." "Already planned on it." They stood in silence, watching the dust settle over what had once been the Vale estate. "What about us?" Lucien asked quietly. Serena had been waiting for that question, had been asking it herself for months. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I don't know what normal looks like. Don't know how to have a relationship that isn't built on survival. Neither do I. So maybe we figure it out together, slowly, without pressure or expectations or—" "Serena." She looked at him. "I'm not going anywhere," Lucien said. "Take all the time you need. I'll still be here." Something in her chest cracked open. Not quite healed, but healing. "Okay," she whispered. He kissed her forehead, gentle, careful, asking permission with every movement, and for the first time in her life, Serena understood what safety felt like when it wasn't wrapped in violence. Haven House opened its doors 8 months later. The grand opening was covered by every news outlet in Miami. Claire Morrison wrote a feature article. Politicians showed up for photo opportunities. But the real moment happened at midnight, after all the cameras left and the crowds dispersed. A woman arrived at the door with 2 children and a suitcase held together with duct tape. She had bruises shadowing her jaw and terror in her eyes. Elena answered the door. "Can I help you?" "I saw the news. About this place. About Serena Vale." The woman's voice shook. "Is it true? That you help people like me?" Serena appeared behind Elena, having heard the knock. She looked at this woman, this stranger who could have been her in another timeline, and saw herself reflected back, scared, desperate, trying to believe that safety was possible. "It's true," Serena said. "Come in." The woman started crying. "I don't have anywhere else to go." "You do now." Serena held the door open and the woman walked through with her children clinging to her sides. Over the next hour, Elena got them settled, fed them, found clothes and beds and blankets, made them understand that this wasn't temporary, that they could stay as long as they needed. The children fell asleep immediately, exhausted from whatever horrors they'd fled. But the woman sat in the common room with Serena, holding a cup of tea with shaking hands. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you get away?" Serena thought about that night in Biscayne Bay, about swimming until her arms gave out, about choosing to kick toward the surface one more time, even though every logical part of her brain said it was hopeless. "I had help," she said, "people who believed me when I told the truth. People who were willing to fight when I couldn't fight for myself. I don't have that." "You do now." Serena met her eyes. "What's your name?" "Maria." "Maria, you're safe here. Your children are safe here. And we're going to help you figure out what comes next, one day at a time." Maria's hand steadied slightly on her cup. "What if he finds me?" "Then we deal with it. Together." Serena glanced toward the window where Lucien's security team patrolled the perimeter in vehicles that didn't advertise their purpose. "You're not alone anymore." Maria nodded slowly, and something in her expression shifted. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of belief that hope might be possible. 6 months after Haven House opened, Serena sat in her office reviewing intake forms for new residents. 30 women and 43 children had come through their doors. 22 had successfully relocated to permanent housing. 15 were in the process of filing restraining orders or divorce proceedings. Every single one of them was alive. That mattered more than anything. A knock on her office door pulled her attention. "Come in." Lucien entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking like he'd been up all night. "Rough case?" Serena asked. "Something like that." He set 1 coffee in front of her and collapsed into the chair across from her desk. "Woman came to me yesterday. Husband's been beating her for 6 years. She finally got the courage to file charges. Judge dismissed them because the husband's a prominent surgeon." Serena's jaw tightened. "What are you going to do?" "What I always do. Find evidence the legal system can't ignore." Lucien's expression was dark. "The surgeon has a pattern. 3 previous wives, all mysteriously injured, all settled out of court with NDAs. How long will it take? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. He sipped his coffee. "I told her about Haven House. Offered her a room here while I work. We have space." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Their relationship had evolved slowly over the months. Neither of them quite knew what to call it. More than friendship, not quite conventional partnership. They had dinner together most nights, worked on cases together, fell asleep on each other's couches more often than in their own beds. But they'd never rushed, never pushed, just let it develop at its own pace. "The prosecutor called," Lucien said eventually. "Victor's appealing his sentence." Serena's stomach tightened. "Will it work?" "No. His lawyers are desperate, grasping at technicalities." Lucien's expression softened. "He's going to die in prison, Serena. You won." "It doesn't feel like winning. What does it feel like?" She thought about that question, really thought about it. "Like surviving," she said finally. "Like making it to the other side of something that should have killed me. But I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting." "Is that enough?" "Some days." She looked at him. "Other days I wake up and still expect to see him standing in my doorway. Still flinch when someone raises their voice. Still have nightmares about drowning in the bay. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the person who caused it is gone." "I know." Serena set down her coffee. "But I'm learning to live with it. Learning that healing isn't linear, that some scars don't fade. And I'm okay with that." She smiled, small but genuine. "I'm building something here, helping people who need what I needed. That matters more than being perfectly healed." Lucien reached across the desk, his hand resting palm up. An invitation, not a demand. Serena placed her hand in his. "You know what I realized?" she said quietly. "What?" "Monsters don't always look like criminals, but salvation doesn't always look like rescue either." She squeezed his hand. "Sometimes it looks like someone asking the right question, giving you tools instead of answers, standing beside you instead of in front of you." "Is that what this is? Salvation?" "No." Serena's smile widened. "It's partnership, the kind that's built on honesty and respect and the understanding that we're both still figuring this out." "I can work with that." They sat together in her office, hands linked across a desk in a building that used to be a prison and was now a sanctuary. Outside, Miami continued its chaos. Traffic and sirens and the endless rhythm of a city that never stopped moving. But inside Haven House, 30 women and 43 children slept in beds that were safe. Ate meals they didn't have to fear would be thrown at them, spoke their truths without being silenced, and learned, slowly, painfully, one day at a time, that survival was just the beginning, that life after trauma was possible, that monsters could be defeated, and that sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found people willing to fight beside you until the darkness finally lifted and you could see the light again. Serena looked out her office window at the bay shimmering in the distance. The same bay she'd nearly drowned in 6 months ago. The same water that had tried to kill her. But she'd kicked toward the surface, kept swimming, refused to let the darkness win. And now, on the other side of that impossible night, she'd built something permanent, something that would outlast Victor's violence, something that proved she was worth more than the sum of her scars. Haven House stood where the Vale estate had once been, a building raised from the rubble of trauma and transformed into proof that endings could become beginnings, that victims could become survivors, that the abused could become advocates, that one woman's choice to speak the truth, no matter the cost, could create ripples that saved lives beyond her own. Serena Vale had spent 25 years learning that silence kept you breathing, but in the end, it was speaking up that let her live. And that, finally, was enough.